Chapter 598. 2 days later. The most majestic city at the border of the wasteland, Ping City. On top of the city walls, there were many armored soldiers, looking mighty and majestic. Compared to before Qin Hao came, the city walls of Ping City had been artificially extended by thousands of meters. Standing on top, one's field of vision became wider, and the defensive power was enhanced to another level. As for the hundreds of thousands of border guards in Ping City, they were all on standby, ready to attack. From afar, people could see a damaged treasure ship gliding in the sky. It was not fast, but it made a heavy buzzing sound, and it was emitting billowing black smoke. After waiting for so long, you're finally here. Die! A mighty roar suddenly sounded from the city walls. A general in his 50s, wearing heavy armor, turned into a black shadow and flew toward the treasure ship. Immediately, the sound of drums and the excited roars of soldiers could be heard from the city walls. The general who flew out was the governor of Ping City, Simon Laoqing, who had lost 2 of his sons. He gritted his teeth and glared like a tiger. From afar, he gathered all of his vitality and punched the treasure ship with a Red King-level attack. The red fist radiance was extremely turbulent, like an expanding light beam. It extended for hundreds of meters. With a loud bang, it penetrated the entire ship. The hull exploded in the air, and the broken wooden planks flew everywhere, exploding into pieces. Ha ha! The governor is mighty. The enemy didn't even react. He's too powerful. I didn't even hear a scream. This time, our Ping City has made a great contribution. Brothers, quickly go down and search the scattered wreckage. See if you can find the corpse of the Qin family's remaining member. What's there to look for? The governor's punch can also penetrate the city walls. The Qin family's remaining members are most likely dead. Some of the deputies and soldiers on the city walls began to flatter Simon Laoqing, praising his bravery. I was a little excited and didn't control myself. I'm ashamed. Looking at the destroyed ship, Simon Laoqing's mighty body floated in the air. He rubbed his fist, and his face was filled with pride. He was extremely satisfied. Although he had not fought for many years, the power of his punch was enough to seriously injure opponents of the same level, let alone Qin Hao, a mere saint. Now that he had personally killed the enemy who had harmed the 3 great clans, the greatest credit should belong to Simon Laoqing. He couldn't help but put his hands on his waist and laugh wildly. Old City Lord Qing, it's too early for you to be proud. There's no one on this ship. Suddenly, a strange voice sounded beside him. There was no emotion in the voice. Then, the space in front of Simon Laoqing rippled, and a handsome middle-aged man with white hair and a youthful complexion walked out. The middle-aged man held a fly whisk in his hand. There was no fluctuation of yuan qi on his body. He floated lightly in the air. Even his aura could not be sensed. He was one with the heavens and earth. Although he did not display any of his cultivation, this kind of extremely restrained power was obviously a terrifying character. But there was something very funny about him. He was wearing a pointy hat on his head. Of all the colors, the hat had to be green. Junior pays his respects to Grand Elder Dugu Xianxiao. Simon Laoqing's heart suddenly contracted violently. In front of more than 100,000 subordinates, as the city lord of a military city, he knelt down towards the middle-aged man. Moreover, he was prostrating himself on the ground. His entire body was lying on the sole of the middle-aged man's feet like a lowly dog. Simon Laoqing did not even dare breathe loudly after he knelt down. The middle-aged man looked younger than Simon Laoqing, but in fact, he was more than 3 times older than Simon Laoqing. In other words, this middle-aged man with white hair and a youthful complexion was close to 200 years old. He was the grand elder of the Dugu family. Regardless of strength or status, he was above the Dugu family head. Furthermore, he was the strongest person in the 3 great clans and was known as the #1 expert of the wasteland. It was said that Dugu Xianxiao had already been a 4th-level Yuan Venerate before he had gone into seclusion. Now that he had come out of seclusion after 20 years, Simon Laoqing could not imagine how strong he had become. Simon Laoqing was very puzzled by Dugu Xuanxiao's personal visit to Ping City. A month ago, he had received a notice that the upper echelons of the three great clans had collectively gone to the headquarters of the Northern Border Spirit Array Guild. Dugu Xianxiao had clearly followed along. However, a few days ago, he had appeared out of nowhere in the city lord mansion of Sheeping City, which had simply scared Simon Laoqing out of his wits. Now that he had heard the other parties say that there were no survivors in the ship he had shot down, Simon Laoqing became even more nervous in an instant. Get up. As the city lord of a military city, you are so careless. I don't know why the Shimin family sent a fool like you to Sheeping City to oversee things. Dugu Xianxiao did not look at Simon Laoqing from beginning to end. To him, the person lying at his feet was just an ant. After saying that, he looked up at the sky. His bright eyes seemed to be able to disperse the clouds. With a glance, he could see the entire wasteland. Interesting, Dugu Xianxiao sneered. Could it be that the other party had abandoned his flying artifact to cross the boundary of Sheeping City on foot? If he wanted to conceal his aura and pass through the mountains and forests, it would not be a bad idea. It's a pity that with me overseeing things, even an ant can forget about leaving the wasteland under my watch. Dugu Xuanxiao's eyes suddenly surged with boundless killing intent. He clenched his fists as if his hatred for Qin Hao had reached its peak. With a flick of the whisk in his hand, his body disappeared in the air again. No one knew where he had gone. The other party's broken ship had already flown over. He guessed that Qin Hao should be hiding nearby. In fact, he did not care about the modified defensive power of Sheeping City at all. He alone was enough to keep watch. His consciousness spread out. Even if Qin Hao turned into a worm, he could forget about escaping. He was a 5th-level Yuan Venerate. Even if the heavens descended this time, they would not be able to save Qin Hao from the wasteland. At the same time, on the other side, Brother Hao, what should I say about you? This move is extremely risky. You are simply stupid. Yu Dakin was full of dissatisfaction and resentment as he paced back and forth anxiously in front of Qin Hao. At present, they were steering Wei Xiaobao's boat towards the direction of Nanshui City. Nanshui City spanned half of the wasteland. It was a small, remote city with nothing special about it. However, Qin Hao had left Shaolei and Shaojun in a small mountain village outside the wilderness of Nanshui City and had forgotten to go back to pick them up. Just as they were about to fly out of the wasteland, he suddenly remembered. Therefore, Qin Hao had turned back and headed for Nanshui City at full speed these 2 days. If he left the wasteland, he had to bring Shaolei and Shaojun with him. This was Qin Hao's promise to him. Thank you for escorting me, brother Yu. Thank you very much, Qin Hao replied calmly. The speed of the Northern Yin treasure ship was extremely fast. When it turned back, it was blocked by many martialists from the 3 great families. After all, the ship had just flown away from the various cities a few days ago. Now that it was flying back, it had aroused a lot of suspicion. However, all the obstacles vanished when Yu Dakin appeared. Chapter 599. With Yu Dakin's appearance, the warriors from the 3 families did not have the guts to search the ship. Yu Dakin already knew about the grudge between Qin Hao and the 3 families on the way here. Yu Dakin was very against taking the risk to pick them up. According to their speed, they should be at Luoshui's border now, and Qin Hao should be safe. However, if they were to fly back now, Qin Hao's life would be in danger if anything went wrong. Yu Dakin would also be implicated and could forget about returning to Daliao alive. Shaolei and Shaojun are the royal bloodline of the wasteland. As a member of the Qin family, I should shoulder the responsibility and ensure their safety. Qin Hao looked at Yu Dakin and said apologetically. He glanced at the giant rock in the corner. The giant rock had shrunk to the size of a pheasant. Half of its feathers were torn off, and the proud feathers on its head were bald. It looked very funny. Its eyes were filled with fear as it shivered in the corner. In front of it, the dog spirit rolled its eyes. It had a large beast bone in its mouth, and from time to time, its tongue would curl out and lick it. The dog spirit remembered clearly that the giant rock was arrogant in the sky above the Fengli temple. At that time, the dog spirit was weak. As Qin Hao's guardian, it did not have the strength to fight against Duan Ziju's mount. Now it was different. Lord Dog had risen. Therefore, when it came back from chasing the broom, it saw the giant rock. It was so anxious that its eyes turned red, and it rushed up while howling. As it was infected by the fire energy of the red lotus in the interspatial ring, its resistance to fire was very strong. The flaming giant rock's flames could not hurt the dog spirit at all. It was not a match for it all. If Qin had not come out in time to stop it, the giant rock would have been torn apart alive. This dog spirit would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Looking at the flaming giant rock that was scared to death, Yu Dakin's face was a little twisted. Duan Ziju's mount had always been fierce. Who would have thought that it would be tamed by a wild dog today? Sai, I hope that after this trip, we can successfully fly out of the wasteland's border and out of Western Flat City. I can also return to report to Princess Jingyue with a peace of mind. Although Yu Dakin was against Qin Hao's way of doing things, at the same time, he was impressed by Qin Hao's chivalry. Honestly speaking, Yu Dakin didn't have the courage to brave the pressure of millions of enemies and go back to fetch someone. Whoosh! The 100-meter-long ship flashed high in the sky and disappeared into the clouds. It plunged straight into the wilderness of Nanshui City and landed at the place where Xiaolei and Xiaojun were staying. Nanshi Village. The originally peaceful little mountain village had turned into a river of blood today. Corpses were strewn all over the ground. The villagers' simple and crude houses were ablaze with flames. Countless cries and screams could be heard from within the flames. It was obvious that they were in extreme pain. However, no one dashed through the flames to escape, because in front of the fire, there were more than 100 soldiers. They were wearing armor, with sabers hanging from their waists. They were holding torches and laughing happily. There were also a few people who were mercilessly throwing the torches in their hands at the burning houses. They cheered as they threw the torches. This village is really good. They have so many treasures hidden away. Why didn't I realize that they were so rich before? A soldier stuffed the treasures in his hands into his arms in satisfaction. His clothes were stuffed to the brim, and it was obvious that he couldn't fit them in anymore. A few necklaces popped out and hung on his armor, shining brightly. This soldier's eyes were shining, and he was drooling. He wasn't the only one. His companions were the same. After robbing the villagers of their wealth, their bowls and alms bowls were full. Many gold bars fell out of their pockets. There were also some soldiers who were carrying long spears. On the tip of their spears were the geese that the villagers had painstakingly raised. They had practically ransacked Nanshi village, not even sparing the geese. Let's go, brothers. Let's go see if our regiment commander has settled that pretty chick. Ha ha ha. A burly man who seemed to be the captain threw the torch in his hand at the burning house in front of him. At that moment, the cries and shout from the house stopped. As they turned around, the house collapsed with a rumble. This small army of 100 people was the Dugu family soldiers who had been ordered to search for Qin Hao. They were part of Nanshui City's 2nd Regiment. This kind of search was carried out throughout the entire wasteland. They didn't let go of a mountain, a river, an inch of land, or even a pile of grass. Even if they had to dig 3 feet into the ground, they still had to find Qin Hao. However, when they arrived at Nanshi Village, the soldiers suddenly realized that the villagers here were living far better than the other villages. Some of the women even wore jewelry, and the quality of the jewelry was quite good. This attracted the attention of their regiment commander. Thus, the village chief was forced to hand over all the treasures left behind by the immortal in exchange for the safety of his family. Who would have thought that the soldiers would take the money and become even more ambitious? They believed that there were even more treasures hidden in the village. Slowly, it evolved into a massacre and humiliation. The elderly were driven together and burned alive. The children were stabbed to death. The young girls were tortured by the soldiers in every possible way. The heads of the village chief's family were hung on the old locust tree at the entrance of the village as a warning to others. The pretty girl that the captain had mentioned was Xiaolei. However, because Xiaojun had the thunder fireball that Qin Hao had refined before he left, he suddenly threw it at the soldiers' faces. Immediately, the entire group was reduced to ashes. At this moment, the regiment commander of the 2nd Regiment, a general with the cultivation of a mortal saint, was facing off against Xiaojun. Kid, I'll make you beg for death. I'll appease the souls of my 200 brothers who died in heaven. In an unremarkable little courtyard in the inner area of Nanchi village, 1,000 people surrounded the small courtyard like an iron bucket. Not even a drop of water could leak out. A general with a large rectangular face gritted his teeth and pointed at the young boy in the courtyard. He hated Xiaojun to the bone. Sister, don't be afraid. I won't let them get close to you. I'll be as brave as Big Brother Qin Hao. Compared to his previous cowardice, Xiaojun's face was now filled with determination. Even though his legs were trembling, he didn't take a single step back. Behind him was a young girl in a white dress. That was his sister. You bastards, you're devoid of humanity. You'll suffer retribution. In the courtyard, other than Xiaolei and Xiaojun, there was also a white-haired old woman. The old woman was a lonely old woman. She had been sent by the village chief to take care of Xiaolei and Xiaojun, but she had unexpectedly survived. Nanchi village had been reduced to rubble. Her face was covered in tears as she pointed at the general with a large rectangular face. The general was originally the protector of the people, but today he had turned his butcher's knife against his own people. The people had provided military funds, but in the end, all they got was a massacre. They were feeding their conscience to the dogs. Ha ha ha, I'm laughing my head off. What retribution? You old bastard. The long-faced general moved. He licked his lips and slowly pulled out the battle sword at his waist. He moved his burly body and walked towards the young Xiaojun with a suffocating pressure. After surrounding them for so long, he had ordered the soldiers to get close to Xiaojun more than once. Xiaojun seemed to have used up all the terrifying black balls in his hands. Chapter 600. Don't worry, I won't kill you with one strike. I'll leave you with your cheap life, so that you can watch how I'm loving your sister. That kind of helplessness, struggle, and torture will eventually become your nightmare. You'll die in fear and despair. I'll cut off your limbs first. The long-faced general roared. He held his sword with both hands, hid it under his armpits, and charged at Xiaojun. Although he did not use his yuan qi, his speed was still dazzling. He had a ferocious aura like a tiger running down the mountain. Swoosh! The moment he moved, Xiaojun raised his hand and threw an unknown object in front of him. There's more. The long-faced general was slightly surprised. He knew that the object was the thunder fireball that had burned the soldiers to death. The quality of his thunder fireball was extremely good. Be it ordinary soldiers, elite soldiers, or even peak sky grandmasters, all of them died immediately after coming into contact with it. He was very wary of this and did not dare to be careless. He believed that if he was burned by the flames, even if he did not die, he would lose half his life. Therefore, he raised his sword and hit the thunder fireball with a clang, sending it flying. He was stunned on the spot and said angrily, "It's a stone? You're courting death." What he had hit was not a thunder fireball, but a small stone thrown by Xiaojun. It turned out that Xiaojun had used up all his thunder fireballs and was just bluffing to play with him. This made the long-faced general feel deeply humiliated. I'll give you another one. Xiaojun's rhythm was very fast. He raised his hand and threw another thunder fireball at the long-faced general's face. The same method will not work a second time. Do you think I'll fall for your trick again? You're courting death. The long-faced general was very angry. He waved his left hand and slapped it in front of him. Pa! There was a crisp sound. But this time, he did not hit a small stone, but a real thunder fireball. It was also the last remaining thunder fireball in Xiaojun's hand. Boom! Flames exploded in the field, wrapping around the long-faced general's palm and spreading up his arm. At this moment, a hoarse scream reverberated. As the long-faced general had expected, he could not withstand the flames of the thunder fireball. Even if he used his sage yuan qi to resist, he could not stop the flames from devouring him. His body. However, he was indeed ruthless enough. He made a prompt decision and swung his sword down. With a poochie sound, his left arm was cut off from the shoulder. Looking at the severed arm burning at his feet, the long-faced general's heart was filled with fear for a long time. Damn it! Damn it! I'm the dignified commander of Southwater City's 2nd Division. I'm a 5-star mortal saint. I've fought countless battles throughout my life, and I've made countless contributions in battle. Yet, I've actually lost to a brat today. The long-faced general was enraged, and his eyes instantly turned bloodshot. He had lost so much face in front of his own soldiers, letting a child cripple one of his arms. If word of this got out, wouldn't people laugh their heads off? Die! Carrying extreme anger, the long-faced general roared endlessly. Ignoring his bleeding shoulder, he turned into a blur as he charged forward. Brandishing his sword with one hand, he hacked toward Xiaojuan's head, wanting to cleave this devilish brat in half. I'm sorry, sister. I try my best. Xiaojun knew that he would not be able to escape death. However, in the face of death, he was instead calm. With a faint smile, he turned back to look at his sister. He still could not fulfill his promise with Qin how to protect his sister. As a man, he was simply too much of a failure. Xiaolei did not say anything in response. Her slender, white, jade-like hand stroked Xiaojuan's head. Then, she hugged her little brother and closed her eyes. She muttered in her heart, "Fortunately, the sacred dragon ring is in Qin Hao's hands. Treat it as repayment for Qin Hao's life-saving grace." She did not know where Qin Hao was right now, and whether he was safe. She hoped that he would never come back. She hoped that his memories would forever remain at the most peaceful scene in Southwater Village when he left. Swoosh! The battle sword mercilessly hacked down, bringing with it a cold, killing intent. It was like a hurricane pressing down on her head. As it hacked down, the sword wind unbridled swept up Xiaolei's hair. However, she was not afraid. To her, perhaps death was a release. However, after a long time, Xiaolei did not feel any pain. Instead, there were frequent exclamations of shock. Xiaolei could not help but frown slightly. She slowly opened her eyes. Oh my God, is this real? He only used 2 fingers to clamp down on Senior Master's full-powered sword. Along with the exclamations of shock, the long-faced general stood in front of Xiaojun. His right hand tightly gripped the battle sword that was as wide as a palm. He exerted all his strength to press it down. His face was red, and blue veins popped out on his face. He seemed to be using all his strength. However, the sword stopped above Xiaojun and Xiaolei's heads. It could not advance even half an inch, as if it was frozen in the air. Moreover, there were 2 fair fingers blocking the sword blade. Xiaolei was immediately shocked. She silently turned her head to look. Behind her stood a young man in white. He stood with his hands behind his back. He was very tall and had deep eyes. There was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. He gave off a strong sense of mystery, but also a very amiable feeling. There was no doubt that it was Qin Hao. Elder brother Qin Hao. Elder brother Qin Hao, you are finally back. I thought you didn't want us anymore. After surviving a great disaster, Xiaojun cried out loud. His empty heart seemed to have found sustenance. Young Master Qin Hao. Xiaolei still had not reacted. Her beautiful eyes were wide open. She felt as if she was in a dream. Just a moment ago, she was still thinking about Qin Hao. In the next second, he appeared. When she thought of you, you were in her mind. When she thought of you, you were in front of her. I promised you that I would come back. A gentleman's promise is as heavy as a mountain. Qin Hao replied with a smile. He even used his left hand to touch Xiaojuan's head. He appeared to be at ease. Suddenly, the long-faced general's face became even more embarrassed. It was as if excrement was blocked in his anus. It made him extremely depressed. Qin Hao not only used 2 fingers to clamp down on his sword blade, but also had the mood to joke with others. He completely ignored the full-powered attack of a saint-level opponent. Shame. It was a great shame. Who are you? Although the long-faced general was depressed and angry, he was even more afraid. The fear in his heart was growing stronger and stronger. Who I am is not important. What is important is the villagers of Nanchi village who were harmed. You will pay with your blood. Qin Hao said coldly. With that, he twisted his fingertip. Crack! The general's sword, which was forged by the army, broke in one blow. Immortal Elder, please uphold justice for our suffering Nanchi village. Kill this group of human-faced beasts. Kill these dog-made things. Kill them. The old woman in the courtyard, the last remaining elder of Nanchi village, knelt on the ground and sobbed as she begged. So you are the one who left behind the treasure. The long-faced general was inexplicably delighted. No, I am the one who spared your life. After breaking the long-faced general's sword, Qin Hao's movements were as smooth as flowing water. He picked up the sword tip that had fallen, and with a flash of cold light, he plunged it into the long-faced general's chest. Puffed. The seemingly simple stab was extremely powerful. The impact was extremely terrifying. Like an armor-piercing bullet, it sent the long-faced general's burly body flying 1,000 meters away. The general's bulging eyes bulged. Bang! 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 He crashed through a dozen houses and landed heavily on the ground. Wah! The long-faced general spat out a mouthful of blood. His expression was extremely horrified. He had never imagined that there would be an unruly citizen who would attack the army in Nanshui City's territory. Kill them all. Leave no one alive. Qin Hao ordered coldly, as if he was talking to the air. However, at that moment, for gusts of wind came from the sky. 2 of them were human figures, while the other 2 were beasts. They were unbelievably fast. Before the surrounding soldiers could react, Aku and the others had already fallen into the crowd. Immediately, blood splattered. Broken limbs and bodies of soldiers were thrown into the air. Aku was a peak heavenly saint expert, while Yu Dakin was a 5-star mortal saint. The abilities of the dog spirit and the flaming rock were comparable to low-rank beast kings. How could ordinary soldiers be a match for them? They were like wolves in a pen of sheep. No one could stop them. However, neither Aku nor the dog spirit used Yuan Qi. They only used their physical strength to tear their enemies to pieces. It would be too easy for them to kill them with a single blow. The miserable state of Nanchi village made one's hair stand on end. They had to let these beasts, who were worse than pigs and dogs, experience a fate worse than death. Therefore, when Aku attacked, he only destroyed their organs. He would not kill them with a single blow. The enemy would slowly die in pain and breathing difficulties. When it came to killing, Yu Dakin was not as skilled as Aku. Yu Dakin's method was very simple. He bared his fangs and brandished his claws, tearing off the enemy's legs and shoulders with his bare hands. He was extremely violent. As a loyal, patriotic, and nationalistic youth who loved his people like his own children, even if the people of Nanchi village were not Dalyao's people, Yu Dakin was still infuriated. In just a short moment, the 1,000-man army was strewn all over the ground. They were missing arms and legs. They kept rolling on the ground, screaming miserably. It was like hell on earth. Occasionally, there were a few lucky fellows who managed to escape, but they were caught by the flaming rock. Its sharp claws fell and crushed their heads. In order not to alarm Nanshui City, the flaming rock only transformed into the size of an eagle. You dare to make an enemy of the Wasteland Army. You will not have a good ending. I will make you regret living in this world. The long-faced general roared as he turned into a ball of light and shot into the sky. His heart was bleeding. The 2nd Division was finished. Other than him, no one else had survived. Unfortunately, you won't have that chance. Just as the general rose into the air, Qin Hao chased after him like a ball of flame. He arrived behind him in the blink of an eye and slapped the long-faced general's shoulder, pulling it down with all his might. Qila, along with his armor, the skin on the long-faced general's back was peeled off by Qin Hao. He was covered in blood. You could try hanging on a tree, too. A metal chain flew up from below. After catching it, Qin Hao smashed the man's dantian with a palm. The chain pierced through the man's abdomen. Qin Hao swung his hand, and the chain flew out with the long-faced general hanging on an old locust tree at the village entrance. Chapter 601. As long as we pass Shiping City and enter the Luoshui border, we will be safe. A few days later, Yu Dakin drove the treasure ship, carrying Qin Hao and the rest to Shiping City. Looking at the blue sky and white clouds outside the window, he heaved a sigh of relief. Before this, Not a single soldier of the 2nd Division escaped from the disaster of Nachi village. Qin Hao stood under the tree, looking at the long-faced general who was hung up. He screamed for an entire day and died in the wee hours of the morning after his blood ran out. The more he screamed, the faster he bled, and the process was extremely painful. After that, Qin Hao threw a ball of red lotus fire towards the ruins of Nachi village. The whole mountain was razed to the ground, and the soldiers who were not dead were buried together, with the ground as the coffin and the sky as the lid. Qin Hao set up a grand funeral for the villagers of Nachi village. As for the old lady, she rejected Qin Hao's good intentions and did not board the ship. She knew that her status was low, and she was from a different world from Qin Hao. So she stayed and lived alone at the foot of the mountain as a tomb keeper. This time, I will have to trouble Brother Yu to remove that thing from Simon Laoqing. When I go to Daliao, I will treat Brother Yu to a meal. Qin Hao smiled at her. Looking at the approaching Shiping city, a strong sense of danger rose in his heart. Looking down through the clouds, the security of Shiping city seemed to have increased a lot, and the soldiers were strong. He hoped that it was just his imagination, and that he could bring Xiaolei and Xiaojun back to Luo Shui safely. Calculating the time, Qin had already missed 3 days of school. In the ship, Xiaolei and Ke were talking and laughing. Along the way, they found out about each other's identity. Although at the beginning, there was a grudge between them, but with Qin Hao's relationship, the grudge was quickly broken, and now they were like sisters. As they got closer to Luo Shui, they felt more relaxed. As long as they got out of the wasteland, they would be able to see the bright world of Luo Shui. Who's there? Stop it right now. As expected, just as they flew to the sky above Shiping City, a deep roar could be heard. Immediately, a tall figure wearing heavy armor floated up from below, blocking the path of the treasure ship. On the city walls, there were countless giant crossbows that were ready to fire and aimed at the sky. As long as Simon Laoqing gave the order, these powerful crossbows would definitely fire and turn the people on the ship into hedgehogs. Yu Dakin nodded at Qin Hao, giving him a reassuring look. Then, he walked out alone. Qin Hao secretly circulated his yuan qi. The ominous feeling in his heart grew heavier as he prepared for battle. It was one thing for Simon Laoqing to let him go. If they didn't let him go, Qin Hao would have to fight them. With the power of the Red Lotus Flame Source Spirit, as well as the help of the Dog Spirit and the Flaming Rock, he was confident in fighting Simon Laoqing. Old Qing City Lord, we haven't seen each other for a long time. Have you even forgotten about me? Out of the cabin, Yu Dakin stood proudly at the bow of the ship. With the tone of a superior, he looked at Simon Laoqing expressionlessly. Yu Dakin really didn't care about a mere Western Liang City Lord, because he was the eldest son of the Charging Wolf Legion's commander in Daliao. So, what's young master you? Simon Laoqing hurriedly saluted and smiled. A while ago, Yu Dakin rode the Flaming Rock back and forth. He had passed by Shiping City twice, so he was familiar with him. However, Simon Laoqing had a trace of doubt. A few days ago, when Yu Dakin flew back from Luo Shui, he had told him that he was going back to Daliao in the northern border. Now he was back, and he was driving a big ship. Don't you see the Northern Yin flag on the ship? There are members of the Northern Yin royal family on the ship. They're going to Luo Shui to play. What? Old Qing City Lord dares to stop the Northern Yin treasure ship? Yu Dakin saw the other party's doubt and said in a questioning tone. But in fact, Yu Dakin's palms were already sweating. A member of a Murong royal family of Northern Yin? Simon Laoqing was shocked. He couldn't afford to offend him. He was so scared that his face changed and couldn't help but want to kowtow. But in the next second he asked, as a noble of Daliao, why are you the boatman of Northern Yan's Prince Murong? When he asked this question, Yu Dakin was stunned. Indeed, even if Daliao was on good terms with Northern Yin, with Yu Dakin's status, he wouldn't stoop so low as to be someone's boatman, even if the other party was a member of the Northern Yin royal family. It's none of your business. I'll be the lackey of whoever I want to be. Get lost. Get lost immediately. Don't blame me for not reminding you. Prince Murong is drinking and having fun in the ship. If you disturb his mood, your entire wasteland can't bear the consequences. Yu Dakin didn't retreat. Instead, he advanced and threatened loudly. This, Simon Laoqing was terrified. If it was a normal day, he would naturally challenge Yu Dakin. But today was different. The supreme elder of the Dugu clan was in the city. Dugu Xianxiao had given a strict order that no one was allowed to step out of Western Fair City. Young master Yu, I'm just following orders. I hope you can forgive me. I have to board this ship personally and check it out. If I offend Prince Murong because of this, I'm willing to accept the punishment. Simon Laoqing said in fear. Although he was afraid, he still flew towards the ship. Shimin Laoqing, how dare you overstep the authority of the imperial family of Northern Yen? Are you trying to make us, the Great Liao and Great Yin of Northern Border, dispatch our army to wipe out your wasteland? Yu Dakin's heart was in his throat. His back was drenched in sweat. If Simon Laoqing boarded the ship, Qin Hao would definitely be discovered. But Shimin Laoqing was also very panic-stricken in his heart. He felt that he had fallen into the misfortune of 18 generations of ancestors. If he retreated, he would be killed by Dugu Xianxiao. If he went forward and angered the Northern Yen royal family, it would undoubtedly bring a great disaster to the Shimin clan. But he could only brace himself and approach, even if there were thousands of donkeys galloping in his heart. One last sentence. Stop immediately. If you don't blame me for being impolite. Yu Dakin got into a fighting posture and waved his hand. Screech! The flaming rock flew out of the cabin. Its body instantly expanded to 300 feet. Its body was covered in flames, and its wings were flapping. It was like a blazing sun, blocking Simon Laoqing's path. It's okay. Let him come in. Let me see what kind of hero the Wasteland Lord is. Of course, it's easy for him to come in. But whether he can get out of here alive would depend on the ability of the Lord Simon Laoqing. Suddenly, a dignified voice sounded in the cabin. Qin Hao changed his voice and imitated another voice. He also brought out the tone of a superior person to the fullest. In fact, the air of an emperor in his tone was even stronger than that of the Luo River Emperor. The imposing manner in this sentence was enough to make people revere him. I don't dare. Please forgive me, Prince Moro. I'll let you in. I'll let you in immediately. Simon Laoqing was so scared by Qin Hao's voice that he trembled and almost peed in the air. He was almost sure that the person in the boat was extremely noble. The temperament in the other party's voice could not be imitated by ordinary people. Only a descendant of the royal family could have such a breathtaking, noble aura. He wiped the sweat off his face and moved sideways in front of the treasure boat to make way. Phew! Yu Dakin secretly breathed a sigh of relief. His tensed heartstrings almost broke. At this time, he also admired Qin Hao. If he did not know that the person in the boat was Qin Hao, Yu Dakin would have thought that Emperor Xiao had come in person. The aura of a king was so pure that it was even greater than Emperor Xiao's. It was like an ancient king. Chapter 602. Who are you? Yu Dakin couldn't help but cry out in alarm. Dugu Xuanxiao's appearance made him feel a heavy pressure. This technique wasn't caused by extreme speed, but by tearing space apart. Yu Dakin was from a prestigious family in the northern border, so he still had a discerning eye. He was absolutely certain that Dugu Xianxiao was a venerate powerhouse. Only a venerate almighty could tear space apart. Furthermore, Yu Dakin had only felt the pressure from Dugu Xuanxiao's body from his father. The person before him was a rather powerful figure. My name is Dugu Xianxiao, the supreme elder of the Dugu family in the wasteland. Dugu Xianxiao spoke faintly with a hint of arrogance on his face. He was very satisfied with Yu Dakin's momentary loss of self-control. Dugu Xianxiao, why are you blocking the Northern Yen Prince's treasure ship? Yu Dakin pointed at the other party and reprimanded him. His relaxed mood tensed up again. The person before him was obviously not as easy to talk to as Simon Laoqing. Are the juniors of Great Liao so ignorant of etiquette? You should respectfully address me as senior. Dugu Xianxiao was very unhappy to be reprimanded by a junior. Hee hee. My etiquette is respectful to the seniors of my country, not to the barbarians of this desolate land. Cut the crap. If you have nothing else to say, get out of the way quickly. Don't delay Prince Murong's journey. Although he was extremely nervous, Yu Dakin pretended to be calm on the surface. Furthermore, he had the right to be arrogant. Dugu Xianshao was very strong, but that was only in the wasteland. In the Daliao Empire, a venerate powerhouse could only be considered first-rate. There was still a huge gap between him and the peak powerhouses of the Daliao Empire. For example, Yu Dakin's father was a 6th-level Yuan venerate. If he came to the wasteland, he would be the #1 person. However, under Emperor Zhao's command, he was only fit to be a legion commander. Dugu Xianshao snorted coldly. It had been 100 years since anyone had dared to speak to him in such a tone. In the wasteland, Dugu Xianshao could be considered an emperor. However, he knew that he was at most a local tyrant. He wouldn't be able to scare Yu Dakin, who had seen the world. Dugu Xianshao calmly said, "Half a month ago, an earth-shattering event happened in the wasteland. There is an inauspicious person who slaughtered 2 successors of our Dugu clan, as well as the successor of Shimin clan and the successor of Huangpu clan. As the great elder of the Dugu family, I should investigate the truth and capture the murderer. I would rather kill 10,000 innocents than let half of them escape. Anyone who leaves the wasteland must go through my search. I hope Prince Murong can understand this old man's pain of losing his grandchildren. I lost 2 of my grandchildren. Can you understand the feelings of an old man? So, I hope that Prince Murong can come out for a visit. Of course, this can be considered as the old man treating you with courtesy. If not, I don't mind boarding the ship to check it out myself." "How dare you?" Yu Dakin roared, his eyes spitting fire. Dugu Xianshao was extremely daring. Who did he think he was? To put it nicely, he was a senior at the venerable level. To put it bluntly, he was just a local tyrant from a small world, a frog at the bottom of a well, who dared to board the ship of the Northern Frontier royal family. If Yu Dakin wasn't driving the ship of Northern Yin, but the ship of Princess Jingwei of Daliao, Dugu Xuanxiao's actions today were undoubtedly blasphemous to Her Highness Xiaohan. Although he said so, Yu Dakin really had no reason to stop him. After all, 2 of his grandsons had died. If it were any other time, it would be reasonable for him to make an exception. But today, Yu Dakin had no way to make an exception, because the murderer of his grandchildren was Qin Hao on the ship. Descendant of Daliao, old man has already given you a lot of face. Normally, he wouldn't talk nonsense and annihilate you in one blow. I don't want to waste time. As long as Prince Murong comes out with all your servants, I will immediately let you go. There are 4 people inside. All of them must come out." Dugu Xianshao smiled coldly as he probed the auras of the 4 people in the ship. No one could hide from his eyes. At this moment, Yu Dakin was in an extremely difficult position, and his face was twisted. Similarly, Qin Hao was also extremely nervous and clenched his fists. Dugu Xuanxiao's cultivation was too high. Even if he used a disguise technique, he couldn't hide from his eyes. "Prince Murong, why don't you speak? I've already asked you twice. I'll give you one last chance. If you still don't show yourself, old man will board the ship." While speaking, Dugu Xianshao took a step forward in the air. "How dare you?" Yu Dakin blocked the bow of the ship, his legs trembling. He was really on the verge of collapsing. "You're dawdling. There must be a trap. I'll count down from 3. 3, 2, 1. Dugu Xianshao narrowed his eyes, and his gaze turned cold. He was ready to make a move at any time. Just as he finished his last count, whoosh, whoosh, 2 figures flew out of the cabin and floated in front of the treasure ship. Qin Hao's eyes were cold. Aku was wearing a veil, and her body was surging with primal qi. She didn't disguise herself. In front of a venerable realm expert, their disguise technique could easily be seen through. Therefore, the 2 of them appeared in their true forms. "Old City Lord Qing, how have you been?" Qin Hao said in a deep voice. "It's you." Simon Laoqing was stunned. "Yes, it's me. Today, I had the mood to drink with Prince Murong. I borrowed his ship to return to Luoshui. School is about to start in Qiangbin. I hope you can let me through." Qin Hao said so, but in reality, he was ready to make a move. Ah, let me through. Bah, you don't want to take the road to heaven and barge into hell. Do you think you can hide from me? You're delusional. I've been waiting for you for too long. Creak. Simon Laoqing clenched his fists. His face was filled with hatred. He no longer believed Qin Hao's nonsense. According to the information from Broken Dragon Cliff, the dwarf who was with Qin Yin on that day claimed that he had killed Duguji, Huangpu Daki, and Shimin Laoqing's son. When the news came, Simon Laoqing immediately thought that it was Qin Hao. He was so angry that he almost turned the city lord's mansion upside down. He guessed that the dwarf was most likely Qin Hao, but he didn't dare to jump to conclusions. After all, Qin Hao was a disciple of Qiang Bin. He was a person of Luo Shui and had Elder Jin's guarantee. His identity was very special. If Qin Hao had come to Shi Ping City alone, perhaps Simon Laoqing wouldn't have dared to do anything to him. Unfortunately, from Dugu Xuanqiao's probing and Qin Hao's abnormal behavior, it was clear that he was guilty. At this moment, Simon Laoqing was almost certain that the murderer was Qin Hao himself. Danger really played a good show for old man. He dared to make fun of our three great families. Grand Elder Xian Xiao. This person is the murderer of Dugu Ji, Dugu, Shimin Aoren, and Huangpu Daki. It was also him who caused the #1 alchemist of the Huangpu family to be petrified. He was the one who killed my son, Simon Laoqing said through gritted teeth. He clenched his fists so hard that they made cracking sounds. He should have guessed that it was Qin Hao, but it wasn't too late to see through it today. He immediately ordered for Qin Hao's portrait to be drawn to replace the non-existent dwarf. But after thinking about it carefully, there was no need to do so, because today, Qin Hao was dead for sure. Squeak. Hearing this, Dugu Xianxiao suddenly tightened his grip on the fly whisk. His eyes flashed with monstrous anger. Immediately, he sobered up and loosened his grip slightly. His extremely cold eyes stared at Qin Hao. In his eyes, there was only Qin Hao. I only want to ask you one question, Duguji. Did you kill him with your own hands? Yes. Since they had torn off all pretenses, Qin Hao didn't need to hide anymore. He only regretted that during the shocking battle at the Broken Dragon Cliff, he was so angry that he revealed a flaw. Good, very good. Do you know who Duguji is to me? He's my son. Dugu Xianxiao roared. The roar was so fierce that it was like a sudden thunderclap in the clear sky. The purple flame aura of a venerable expert spread out like a gust of wind. His momentum rose crazily, and the vigorous Yuan Qi shook the sky and made a strong cry. Whoosh! As soon as these words came out, Qin Hao couldn't help but be a little surprised. The hundreds of thousands of soldiers below, including Simon Laoqing, were stunned at the same time. No one expected that the second son of the Dugu family, Dugu Ji, was not the son of the patriarch, but the son of the supreme elder. Surprised, right? Ha! It's all because the old man drank too much 20 years ago. He made a mistake and mistakenly entered his daughter-in-law's boudoir. Unfortunately, he had sex with her and created the bastard Dugu Ji. But no matter what, Dugu Ji is still my son, and to tell you the truth, the current patriarch of the Dugu family is not of my bloodline, but a puppet that I picked up. Dugu Xianxiao revealed this shocking secret. When he was young, he was wholeheartedly focused on cultivation, which wasted his youth. When he was old, he found that he had no son and no successor to inherit his ancestral business. So, he ruthlessly snatched someone else's child to cultivate, which was the current patriarch of the Dugu family. Dugu Xianxiao thought that he would have no more children in this life. Heaven had eyes. 20 years ago, he cultivated a strange technique that greatly improved his fertility. He was so happy that he held a banquet and celebrated with the whole family. In the end, after drinking, he walked into the wrong room in a drunken stupor. That was why he committed such an outrageous act. This was originally a scandal of Dugu Xianxiao and the entire Dugu family. He wanted to keep it a secret for the rest of his life. He would be satisfied as long as he silently watched his son grow up. Otherwise, with Dugu Ji's background, how could he have the ability to become the strongest successor? After all, Duguji's mother was just a concubine. Duguji was born a bastard, but he was stronger than the eldest son. Of course, he had the support of the Supreme Elder behind him. But who would have thought that Qin Hao would kill Dugu Xuanxiao's son? Dugu Xianxiao had lived for more than 100 years before he gave birth to Duguji. In order not to affect his son's reputation, Dugu Xianxiao was willing to hide this secret and not acknowledge his son. They didn't acknowledge each other back then, and now they would never have the chance to do so again. His son was already dead. His body was exposed in the wilderness, and Qin had stripped him naked before he died. I was wondering why you were wearing a green hat. So that's how it is. Qin Hao shook his head and sighed. His sigh was filled with endless sarcasm. The hundreds of thousands of people present also looked at each other with bitter expressions. They could see the contempt in each other's eyes for Dugu Xianxiao. A dignified supreme elder, a venerable realm expert, had done such a heartless scandal. Chapter 603. Dugu Xuanxiao's face turned even paler when he heard the chewing sounds of the soldiers below. Wow, brothers, today is really an explosive event. The patriarch of the Dugu family is not of the orthodox bloodline. He is actually an adopted son, a bastard. Grand Elder Xianxiao even slept with his adopted son's concubine. Speaking of which, Grand Elder Xuanxiao's ability is really powerful. He can still make someone pregnant at such an old age. You've broadened our horizons. Ha ha ha. This is too exciting. Obscenities were like annoying flies that drilled into Dugu Xuanxiao's ears, making his head swell and about to explode. Damn it. Damn it. Dugu Xianxiao let out a low roar as boundless killing intent surged out of his body. Simon Laoqing, who was next to him, was sweating profusely. His heart was in his throat. Since Dugu Xianxiao had dared to publicize his scandal, it was obvious that he would definitely go on a killing spree today. No one will be left alive. Not only would Qin Hao die, but Simon Laoqing would also be silenced. Grand Elder Xianxiao, please calm down. Please calm down. Simon Laoqing's voice trembled with fear as he screamed in fright and fled into the distance. Run? No one will be able to escape today. Dugu Xianxiao gathered his yuan qi and threw a purple ball of light into Shiping City. Boom! Amidst the deafening roar, the soldiers of Shiping City were annihilated by the Yuan Venerate powerhouse before they could react. Hundreds of thousands of people were wiped out. After the light ball exploded, the shockwave rose to a height of 100 zhang. It was like a tsunami in the sea. It rolled and spread in all directions crazily. The huge western Ping City, along with the civilians, the Pill Hall, and the Spirit Array Guild in the city, were all devoured. This earth-shattering blow reverberated for a long time before it stopped. After the smoke and dust settled, the most majestic city in the wasteland had disappeared. On the ground, there was a huge crater that spanned hundreds of thousands of miles. It was extremely shocking. This scene also caused Qin Hao and the others to be dumbstruck, cold sweat dripping down their faces. Ruthless. Really ruthless. Dugu Xianxiao was extremely ruthless. Dugu Xianxiao, you old bastard, you destroyed my Shiman clan city. You and I are absolutely irreconcilable. In the distance, there was a dot of light that disappeared into the horizon. As a king stage powerhouse, Simon Laoqing's fleeing speed could be said to be quite fast. Ordinary people would not be able to catch up to him. I've said before, today, no one will be able to escape from the old man alive. Even Wang Jie is no exception. Dugu Xianxiao said fiercely. Whoosh! His figure disappeared into thin air. Then, another loud, rumbling sound came from the end of the horizon. Qin Hao looked into the distance and saw a ball of purple yuan qi explode in the air where Simon Laoqing had fled. At this moment, Simon Laoqing's aura also disappeared. This is the innate ability of honorable realm experts. Within a million li, they can tear apart space and arrive there in an instant. It's impossible to escape. Qin Hao smiled bitterly. Wang Jie and honorable realm experts were on completely different levels. Simon Laoqing thought that he was lucky to escape, but his head was kicked by a donkey. Kid, you're smart. You know how to run, but it's useless. Buzz. The space in front of Qin Hao fluctuated, and Dugu Xianxiao, who had killed Simon Laoqing, appeared again. He was holding a head in his hand. It was Simon Laoqing's head, and its face was filled with fear. Dugu Xianxiao raised his hand and threw the head into the huge sinkhole below. He looked coldly at Qin Hao and said, "It's your turn next. Tell me, how do you want to die?" Silence. The scene was dead silent. It was so quiet that it made people's hair stand on end, and a chill ran down their spine. Along with the cold wind blowing in the sky, Dugu Xuanxiao's murderous aura seemed to be able to freeze space. At this moment, Yu Dakin and Aku did not dare to breathe. They were so scared that their breathing seemed to have stopped. In front of an honorable realm expert, they were powerless to escape. Even the speed of the treasure ship was not as fast as Dugu Xuanxiao's teleportation. Hee, it seems that I can't return to Daliao. Then let's fight. Yu Dakin recovered from his fear. He was the son of a legion commander, so he had to die with dignity. Qin Hao. Aka looked at Qin Hao with despair in her eyes. There seemed to be a glimmer of hope in her despair. Qin Hao had always been able to create miracles. Today, she hoped that he had a way to subdue Dugu Xianxiao. Perhaps this hope was simply nonsense. You won't die. I swear that I will never let my friends and family suffer any harm in front of me. Qin Hao let out a long sigh of relief and calmed the pressure in his heart. Then, a dark red flame suddenly shot at Dugu Xianxiao from the tip of his finger. His attack was quite fast. Now is the time to fight. Qin Hao roared and activated the water wind step. He held the purple meteorite sword in his hand and attacked the opponent with an afterimage. This flame was the red lotus fire that he had been accumulating for a long time. It was the strongest red lotus fire that Qin Hao could condense at present. This sword strike was the fastest he had ever unleashed. It was as fast as a sword strike. 2 ultimate moves were instantly launched. Perhaps the chances of survival were slim, but Qin Hao had to give it a try. 9 Wolf Slaughter Fist, Void Blood Slaughter. At the same time, Yu Dakin and Aku used their strongest moves. Yu Dakin threw a punch forward. The fist light expanded and formed a giant wolf that was 10 feet long. It roared and pounced at Dugu Xianxiao. With the Tianxia sacred sword in hand, Aku released a cloud of blood qi and hid herself in midair. As an elite assassin, she specialized in assassination. After disappearing, Aku attacked Dugu Xianxiao at the fastest speed. The sharp Tianxia sword stabbed at the opponent's chest. Boom! Boom! On the other side, the flaming rock let out a long cry. 2 flaming blades flew out from under its wings and landed on Dugu Xuanxiao's head with the power to split the sky. No matter who it was, he had used all his strength. These ultimate moves overlapped violently on Dugu Xuanxiao's position. Normally, even a level 5 Yuan Monarch would have been injured. Unfortunately, it was Dugu Xianxiao today. Weak and fanciful. Only your movement technique and this sword move are barely enough to catch old man's attention. However, no matter how high your cultivation is, it's still futile. Dugu Xianxiao waved the fly whisk in his hand indifferently. Buzz. A tornado appeared out of nowhere. It smashed Qin Hao's red lotus fire into pieces. It twisted Yu Dakin's giant wolf into nothingness, and the flaming rock's flame blade shattered into pieces. Uft, uft, uft. The 3 of them spurted blood at the same time. Qin Hao, who had rushed the fastest, was the first to be hit. Just like Aku, his body seemed to have fallen apart. Yu Dakin's body flew backward and smashed into the flaming rock. Then, the 3 of them and the beast fell powerlessly. This is strength. In front of great strength, you are nothing but a motley crew, ants. Kneel down for me. Dugu Xianxiao stretched out his hand, and a layer of purple light swelled under his palm. This purple light turned into a palm that was dozens of acres in size. It pressed down on the heads of Qin Hao and the other 2 like a heavy mountain and slapped down from the sky all the way to the ground. As soon as it came into contact with the flaming rock, the flames on its body dissipated and its feathers scattered. It turned into a dying sparrow. Chapter 604. This layer of purple palm light covered a wide area, enveloping even the treasured ship. Fortunately, at the critical moment, the dog spirit transformed into a giant beast and knocked the treasure ship away, saving Xiao Lei and Xiao Jun from being crushed to death. However, the dog spirit was also crushed to the ground. Brother Qin Hao, young Master Qin Hao, Xiao Lei and Xiao Jun stood on the deck and shouted frantically. They saw Yu Dakin and Ah Ku lying on the ground under the purple palm. It was hard to tell whether they were dead or alive. The dog spirit and the flaming rock shrunk into small beasts, unable to move. Qin Hao was the only one who clenched his teeth so hard that blue veins popped out on his forehead. He raised his hands high above his head to block the falling purple light. Yu Dakin and the others were only shaken by Dugu, Xuanxiao's Yuanqi, and were now seriously injured. If it weren't for Qin Hao's support, this simple palm would have been enough to crush the dog spirit and the others. Hold on, Qin Hao shouted desperately, trying to wake everyone up. If they couldn't withstand this attack, Yu Dakin and the others would fall into a deep sleep and would probably never wake up again. In midair, Dugu, Xianxiao, didn't expect Qin Hao's physique to be so strong. Everyone fell, except for Qin Hao. Your bones are quite tough. Let's see how long you can last. Kneel. With such a shout, Dugu Xianxiao controlled the pressure and violently shook it. Bang! The purple light above Qin Hao's head became even heavier, causing his arms to creak under the pressure. His skin cracked, and blood flowed down his arms and onto his face. His legs sank deep into the ground, up to his knees. However, Qin Hao still didn't fall. He was still bitterly holding on. Good. You got guts. Old man has a whole new level of respect for you. Dugu Ji died in your hands. It's not unjust. Dugu Xianxiao was so angry that he laughed. He was so angry that his teeth hurt. Even Simon Laoqing couldn't block the attack of a venerable realm expert, but Qin Hao did. Qin Hao's body was even harder than steel, which made Dugu Xianxiao want to kill him even more. How should I kill you? Oh, by the way, didn't you laugh at old man's cuckold? Then, I'll reveal my true skills to blind your dog eyes. Now, I'll use the green hat source spirit to refine and absorb you. Your flesh and blood can become a part of the old man's strength. It could be considered a blessing. Dugu Xianxiao leisurely shook his head twice as he spoke. Then, he suddenly nodded to the ground. Whoosh! The green hat on his head flew down and transformed into a giant pot. With a bang, Qin Hao, the dog spirit, Yu Dakin, Ah Ku, and the flaming rock were all thrown into the pot. Not only was Dugu Xianxiao the #1 expert in the wasteland, but he also possessed a source spirit. His source spirit was the green hat on his head. This green hat was incredible. It could be used as a weapon or a defense. It could also be used like alchemy. It could be used to refine people alive. After refining them, Dugu Xianxiao would absorb their power. Dugu Xianxiao was really terrifying. Buzz! The purple light above Qin Hao's head dissipated and was replaced by a green hat. The moment the hat came down, a terrible power was produced inside. This power made Qin Hao's blood boil uncontrollably. Qin Hao's power was quickly draining. Ah! Woof, woof, roar. Immediately, the delirious Yu Dakin let out a scream. His power was taken away. His flesh and blood were shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. Including the dog spirit, Ah Ku, and the flaming rock, they were all being refined by the other party. What the hell is this thing? We must break it as soon as possible. Ah Ku screamed in horror and struggled to get up. However, his whole body was filled with a sense of powerlessness. Ha. You can only wait to be slaughtered by the old man's green hat. Even a 5th level Yuan Venerate won't be able to escape after being trapped inside. Accept your fate. Dugu Xianxiao laughed crazily with a deranged look on his face. As the hat left the crown of his head, revealing his large bald head, he was bald. Of course, he knew the function of his green hat like the back of his hand. When the living thing inside was refined, the pain was worse than being skinned. In the end, even the blood, flesh, and bones would be converted into his energy. Dugu Xianxiao is extremely abnormal. He's actually a source spirit powerhouse. This is good too. I believe the old demon will be satisfied this time. Although Qin Hao was weak, his fighting spirit hadn't diminished. Just now, he had been considering whether to release the old demon and seize the other party's body. After all, the old demon was dying. Even if he didn't succeed in the end, a dying old demon could still cripple Dugu Xianxiao if he went crazy. Now, it seemed that Dugu Xuanxiao's body was the most suitable for the old demon's body. It was also worth Qin Hao's desperate attempt. Success or failure depends on this. Combine the power of two Thearchs and run, old demon. Qin Hao screamed like a madman as he took out the blood jade from his interspatial ring. Then, he focused his mind and mobilized all of his mental power to launch an Emperor-level soul attack, fiercely bombarding Dugu Xuanxiao's green hat. Buzz! At that moment, ripples appeared on the green hat. Dugu Xianxiao, who was in the sky, didn't feel good either. He felt as if a thorn had suddenly pierced his head, causing him to howl in pain. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Qin Hao threw out the purple meteorite sword in his hand and barely managed to break open a gap in the green hat's origin soul. Whoosh! Qin Hao threw the blood jade toward Dugu Xuanxiao's face. Do you want to die? Do you want to die? You're the Blood Emperor. Don't let me down. Qin Hao shouted loudly as he spat out a mouthful of blood on his chest and knelt on the ground on one knee. The spirit attack, just now, was comparable to half of the peak spirit power of his previous life. It was the limit of Qin Hao's current limit. Even if his body was soaked in the blood pool and was formed from 10,000 spirits, it was still on the verge of collapse. And this spirit attack was enough to cause 10 seconds of mental confusion on Dugu Xianxiao. It was also the old demon's only chance to seize the other party's body. Qin Hao tried his best to create this slim chance of survival. Finally, he fell down beside Aku in exhaustion. Just like Yu Dakin, his body began to shrink. Within a blink of an eye, he was reduced to skin and bones. His black hair turned white. After all, Dugu Xuanxiao's green hat origin soul was still trapping everyone. If the old demon failed to seize the body, Qin Hao and the others would be consigned to eternal damnation in the next second. Break for me. Dugu Xuanxiao's consciousness was incomparably chaotic. This sudden spirit attack caused unimaginable damage to him, almost tearing his brain apart. If it weren't for his rock-solid will to take revenge, Qin Hao would have turned him into a lunatic. Although his brain was in chaos, he still saw Qin Hao throw an unknown object. Dugu Xianxiao instinctively felt that it wasn't a good thing. He waved the whisk in his hand and burst out with a wisp of energy. With a pung sound, the blood jade was shattered in the air. But at the same time the blood jade shattered, a drop of incomparably smelly pus flew right into his nose. This drop of pus was the remnant soul of the old demon that had shrunk into the blood jade. As soon as the remnant soul came into contact with Dugu Xianxiao, it immediately spread along his face like an expanding blood net. It went along his nostrils, eyes, ears, and mouth and drilled into Dugu Xuanxiao's body. It was like a maggot that couldn't be shaken off. Chapter 605. He felt as though there were billions of ants rushing into his body. The ants were crazily gnawing at his soul and devouring his will. They filled his blood and filled every single meridian. He wanted to gather his mind and counterattack, but his mind was in chaos. He couldn't concentrate and could only desperately hold his head and scream. A quarter of an hour, half an hour, time gradually passed, just as Qin Hao and the others were about to lose all signs of life bang. The huge green hat above their heads collapsed, and the life force that was extracted returned to their bodies. In an instant, Qin Hao and the others' bodies returned to their original state. Even so, everyone was tortured beyond recognition and exhausted to the extreme. But at this moment, Qin Hao didn't relax his vigilance. His right hand trembled as he reached forward and desperately held the purple meteorite sword. Because at this moment, a figure floated down from the sky and was walking towards their position step by step. It was Dugu Xianxiao. Dugu Xianxiao stopped struggling. His eyes were empty and his footsteps were staggered. His gaze was like that of a walking corpse. Qin didn't know if the old demon had succeeded in taking over his body. If Dugu Xuanxiao's soul hadn't been annihilated, he could easily kill everyone. Da-da-da. The other party's footsteps came to Qin Hao's side and stopped. Qin Hao raised his head with difficulty and met the other party's eyes. Dugu Xuanxiao's empty eyes suddenly flashed with a bloody light and regained their vigor. His powerful aura rose again, and he revealed a strange grin. "Who are you?" Seeing this grin, Qin Hao's heart sank, and he was ready to make a move. "I'm his second master." "Ha ha ha. Old pervert, I succeeded. I succeeded in taking over your body." "Ha ha." In the next second, Dugu Xuanxiao's grin disappeared and was replaced by a wretched look. Clang! Qin Hao threw the purple meteorite sword in his hand to the ground and lay flat on his back. He looked at the blue sky and white clouds and heaved a sigh of relief. This battle was fierce to the extreme. It was as if he had walked through hell. Fortunately, Dugu Xianxiao was successfully taken over, and his venerable realm strength was reduced to the old demons. "So be it. Is it fun to scare me?" Qin Hao sneered. He could not help but move his mind. Roar! The old demon suddenly hugged his head and screamed. He had succeeded in taking over the body, but his soul was still restricted by Qin Hao. "I'm too excited." "Master, you don't know this, but the reason why this old bastard's fertility increased was because he cultivated a blood art. His physique is extremely compatible with mine. Moreover, he has a source spirit, which is simply too good. Where's my green hat?" The old demon wanted to play a joke on Qin Hao, but now he was much more honest. After he calmed his excited heart, he felt a chill run down his spine. Only then did he remember that awesome green hat source spirit. With a thought, the old demon surged his yuan qi and attempted to summon it. In the blink of an eye, countless green dots of light gathered above the old demon's head and gradually condensed into a pointed hat. It was exactly the same as the hat that Qin Hao had just used. It was placed back on the old demon's head. This feeling is too wonderful. This old pervert also has a source spirit. The old demon was very excited. In his previous life, he was the same as Qin Hao. He also didn't have a source spirit. Today, not only did he succeed in taking over the body, he also obtained a strange source spirit. This green hat also had the ability to swallow and refine. It was simply tailor-made for the old demon. "Little master, thank you. Thank you for giving me a second life. This old pervert is very grateful." As he spoke, the old demon knelt in front of Qin Hao. He was so excited that tears flowed out of his eyes. If it wasn't for Qin Hao, he would still be trapped in the devil refining gourd, unable to see the light of day for the rest of his life. If it wasn't for Qin Hao, his wish of being reborn would never have been realized. If it wasn't for Qin Hao risking his life to launch a spiritual attack, the old demon wouldn't have been able to find a body that was so compatible with him. Now that he had really come back to life, it wouldn't be a problem for him to extend his lifespan by another 1,000 years. It's just a pity that this body has just been taken over. I can't perfectly unleash the power of a venerate. At best, I can only unleash the power of a level 5 yuan monarch. The old demon sighed. This was the only flaw in this otherwise perfect situation. However, he wasn't discouraged. As long as he was given some time to completely refine the body, it wouldn't be a problem for him to return to being a level 5 yuan venerate. It wouldn't take too long, even if he recovered the cultivation of the Blood Emperor from his previous life. In this life, the old demon decided to stay by Qin Hao's side and serve him well. "You should be content," Qin Hao said enviously. When he had been reborn, the young master of the Qin family had been a good-for-nothing with no strength at all. His current achievements had been honed bit by himself. In comparison, the old demon was really lucky to have a level 5 yuan monarch cultivation and an origin soul when he had just taken over his body. Meanwhile, Yu Dakin had swallowed 2 bottles of elixir pills and regained some energy. He was looking at the old demon in astonishment. He still didn't understand what was going on. The terrifying Dugu Xianxiao seemed to have changed into a different person. He followed Qin Hao's lead obediently and was full of respect. What are you looking at? Take your eyes off Second Master's hat. The old demon snorted in dissatisfaction and helped Qin Hao up respectfully. Blood Ancestor. Are you really the Blood Ancestor? Have you been reborn? As a descendant of the Blood Ancestor, Aku was naturally sensitive to the aura of the old demon. Well, you did well, old girl. I will forgive you for not calling for reinforcements at the Broken Dragon Cliff. However, your father will have to suffer my punishment later. The old demon said in a low, muffled voice. Dugu Xuanqiao's aura was terrifying. All right, we need to leave this place quickly and return to Luo Shui, Qin Hao said as he looked up at the treasure ship in the sky. The entire disappearance of Western Fair City must have alarmed the three aristocratic families. However, the teleportation array in Western Fair City had been destroyed as well, so they hadn't rushed over yet. Of course, with the old demon holding the fort, Qin Hao wasn't afraid of them at all. The old demon was a powerhouse with an origin soul. Even if he could only exert the strength of a level 5 Yuan Monarch, he might not necessarily lose to Shimin Gang, who was a peak Yuan Monarch. Qin Hao wanted to return as soon as possible because he had missed the start of the school term. Buzz. Just as everyone was returning to the treasure ship, there was suddenly a strong fluctuation in the space above. It was exactly the same as when Dugu Xianxiao had torn the space apart. This meant that another supremacy-level almighty had arrived. Moreover, the power of the fluctuation this time was even greater than Dugu Xuanqiao's aura. Its strength was above Dugu Xuanqiao's. Qin Hao and the others couldn't help but change their expressions drastically. Qin Hao was already exhausted from the battle with Dugu Xianxiao, so he didn't have the strength to launch a spiritual attack. Moreover, the old demon had already obtained a body, so there was no way he could possess it a second time. The heavens want me to die. Yu Dakin roared in grief and indignation. He thought that he had escaped this calamity, but he hadn't expected that the enemy would come again. His aura was even stronger than Dugu Xuanqiao's. This time, he was afraid that he really wouldn't be able to return to Daliao. He would be buried in this trashy western Liang. At this moment, Dugu Xianxiao, who was the incarnation of the old demon, secretly held the whisk in his hand. His head began to sway, ready to take the green hat on his head at any time. Buzz! The distorted ripples in the sky suddenly shook. Immediately, a figure descended from the sky. He was very short and had a weathered face. However, after seeing the other party's face, Qin Hao's tensed heart was completely relieved. The other party wasn't an enemy, but one of the 4 great academies of the Luo Shui Empire, Yao Lao, the deputy dean of Qiangbin. Chapter 606. Thank you, Brother Yu, for escorting me all the way. Qin Hao will remember this. Oh, this is my senior. We'll meet again in Daliao in 2 years. Noticing that Yao Lao's expression was very abnormal, Qin Hao cupped his hands and bowed to Yu Dakin, meaning to bid farewell. Rubbing his nose, Qin Hao raised his head and shouted, I've had enough fun. I'll have to trouble you to take me back. These are all my friends. We're going back to Luo Shui together. By the way, why didn't you come earlier? Qin Hao was a little disgruntled as he started to complain about Yao Lao. If he had come half a step earlier, Dugu Xianxiao wouldn't have been so arrogant. Do you think it's easy for me to find you? I've been searching for your aura all over the world. Cut the crap and come with me. Yao Lao's expression was very nervous. With a wave of his hand, a monstrous gale was set off. Apart from Yu Dakin, Qin Hao and the others, including the big ship above, were all swept into the spatial turbulence. With a wong sound, the sky trembled, and everyone disappeared. We will meet again someday. Yu Dakin stood alone in the empty battlefield. He didn't even have time to react. In the end, Qin Hao and the others were all taken away. Yu Dakin pitifully looked at the great rock that had turned into the size of a sparrow. He picked it up and protected it in his palm. Then, he spread his wings and flew in the direction of the northern border. This battle was indeed dangerous. Fortunately, Qin Hao returned to Luo Shui safely. Then, it was time for him to report back to Xiao Han and Duan Ziju. He had a plan in mind as to how to report back to them. At the same time, Yu Dakin was also looking forward to meeting Qin Hao again. Brother Qin Hao is not only upright and loyal, but his background also seems to be quite extraordinary. Yu Dakin sighed and disappeared in the sky. Luo Shui Empire. In the blink of an eye, Qin Hao returned to the familiar imperial city of Luo Shui. It had to be said that the teleportation ability of a venerable was awesome. It would take 10 days to half a month to cover such a long distance by flying on a treasure ship. In front of Yao Lao, it only took a single thought. However, they did not return to Chiangbin immediately. Instead, Yao Lao landed quietly in a remote corner of the city. "Who are you?" After Yao Lao landed, Ying Rui's gaze swept past Ah Ku, Xiao Lei, and Xiao Jun one by one. His gaze contained a trace of pressure that made people not dare to look at him directly. These people looked unfamiliar. Yao Lao had never seen them around Qin Hao, so of course he wouldn't bring strangers back to the academy. However, upon seeing the old demon, who had transformed into Dugu Xianxiao, Yao Lao couldn't help but feel a little apprehensive. The other party's aura was also that of a Yuan Venerate powerhouse. Moreover, at this moment, the old demon was also looking at Yao Lao with a solemn face. He was not affected by the other party's aura at all, as if he was secretly competing with him. "I am his slave." The old demon lowered his voice and said abruptly. Crack! This gave Yao Lao a fright. His heart pounded violently as he hurriedly covered his chest with his hand. His eyes were filled with shock. Slave? A Yuan Venerate powerhouse was actually Qin Hao's slave? His ancestors? What shocking news. Oh. Don't be surprised. He is just that straightforward. Qin Hao rolled his eyes at the old demon, indicating that he should not speak nonsense. Humph! Upon sensing Yao Lao's shock, the old demon flicked the fly whisk in his hand and gently rubbed the green hat on his head. His face was full of pride, as if becoming Qin Hao's slave was something that brought honor to his ancestors. "I am Aka, Xiao Lei, Xiao Jun. Greetings, old senior of the Luo Shui Empire. We are Qin Hao's friends." Aku, Xiao Lei, and Xiao Jun said in unison. Unlike the arrogant old demon, they bowed timidly to Yao Lao. They were in the Luo Shui Imperial City, which was an unfamiliar place. As far as the eye could see, this place was too luxurious and filled with tall buildings. Yao Lao's body was filled with a powerful aura. Even Aku, who was a heavenly saint, found it difficult to adapt in a short time. Old demon. Qin Hao waved his hand at the old demon and took out a purple gold token. "Take my token and head to the High Clan trade firm with Aku, Xiao Lei, and Xiao Jun. I will look for you in a few days." Qin Hao could clearly sense that Yao Lao had something important to say. However, it was inconvenient to say it in front of the old demon and the others. "How can this be? I have to protect you. I am your slave." The old demon was not willing to leave Qin Hao. He had just obtained a body and had a green hat source spirit, so he was incomparably arrogant. He had to stay by Qin Hao's side to act cool. "Quickly take them away." Qin Hao's face sunk. "All right, but master, if you need anything, send a signal to this old vulgar man. This old vulgar man can instantly return to your side and sweep away all obstacles for you, letting them die without a burial ground." The old demon did not dare disobey. He took the purple gold token and reluctantly left with Aku and the others. He did not even have time to show off before he was chased away. Although the old demon could not display 100% of Dugu Xuanxiao's strength, he was still a supreme expert and had the ability to tear space. Only compared to Yao Lao, the old demon's spatial tear was much smaller. "Big brother Qin Hao, you have to come and see us. I'm a little scared." Before Xiao Jun left, he turned around to look at Qin Hao with a pitiful expression. "Don't be afraid. The people of the High Family Trading Company will take good care of you." Qin Hao gave him an encouraging look. He knew that the Luo Shui Imperial City was too unfamiliar and scared Xiao Jun. After all, This place was more than 100 times more prosperous than the wasteland. What exactly happened? Can you tell me now? After everyone left, Qin Hao looked at Yao Lao with a serious expression. Brat, are you mentally prepared? Yao Lao asked. Qin Hao nodded. Are you sure? I'm sure. All right, I'll take you to a place. However, you're covered in injuries. Yao Lao shook his head and waved his hand. A surge of primordial qi swept out and hit Qin Hao's body. Suddenly, Qin Hao was wrapped in a sacred purple light. In the purple light, the wounds on his body melted at a speed visible to the naked eye. He was instantly full of energy, as if he had been revived. Squeak! As the purple light dissipated, Qin Hao clenched his fists. The fatigue of hiding in the wasteland and fighting for many days was swept away. At this moment, he was in a better state than taking elixirs. Yao Lao was indeed an alchemist. Now, follow me to the palace. Yao Lao grabbed Qin Hao's shoulder and turned into a stream of light, flying straight to Yi Long Yuan's palace. Go to the palace? Qin Hao could not help but be surprised. Shui Han, something big happened to him, Yao Lao said in a heavy tone. Crack! Qin Hao felt as if a thunderbolt had struck his heart, and his face suddenly turned pale. Chapter 607. Before Yi Shuihan started school, an accident had already happened. For half a month, Yao Lao was so anxious that he searched everywhere for traces of Qin Hao. At present, only Qin Hao could save Yi Shuihan. It was just that the wasteland was too far away from the Luo Shui Empire, so Yao Lao's thoughts could not spread to the wasteland. When Qin Hao arrived at Shiping City, Yao Lao had just felt a little. Especially after Qin Hao erupted with all his vitality, the strong and familiar aura confirmed Yao Lao's guess. He was preparing to tear the space to teleport. Helpless, Qin Hao was once again trapped by Dugu Xuanxiao's green hat, completely isolating the eruption of aura. At that moment, Yao Lao lost the specific location of Qin Hao and could not teleport. Presumably, Dugu Xuanxiao's hat source spirit also had some array effects. In fact, Qin Hao's guess was right. Later, the old demon also discovered the special ability of the green hat, but this was a story for later. The strongest country in Western Liang, Luo Shui Empire, Imperial Palace. Inside the Imperial Study, Qin Hao coldly stood below, looking at a handsome middle-aged man sitting on the dragon table. The middle-aged man's eyebrows were exactly the same as Yi Shuihan's, but he was much more stable than the other party. His aura was thousands of times more majestic, exuding the aura of an emperor. Even if Yao Lao was the vice president of Qiang Bin, in front of Yilong Yuan, he could only stand and did not dare to show the slightest dissatisfaction. This was the prestige of the #1 expert in Western Liang. Yilong Yuan was a peak emperor-level expert. When you saw my appearance, you must have been very surprised and shocked. At the same time, your heart is filled with doubts. Yilong Yuan was wearing transparent pajamas like cicada feathers, looking very haggard. He rubbed his temples with both hands and tried to speak to Qin Hao in a gentle tone, because the junior below was his son's good brother. Moreover, only Qin Hao could save his son. I'm really surprised, although I don't understand why. But come to think of it, you should be Shui Han's biological father. Qin Hao said indifferently, neither servile nor overbearing. What an interesting lad. Yilong Yuan showed some appreciation, forced a smile, and nodded. I am indeed Shuin's father, but I am a very incompetent father. Or do you think you have the ability to occupy Jiang State, Beiwu State, Fengyu State, and Yongzhan State, including the northwestern region that originally belonged to Luo Shui? There are about 300 of them. Affiliated states? Yilong Yuan snorted coldly, full of arrogance. Those lands were originally attached to the Luo Shui Empire. Although Yilong Yuan didn't care about them, it wasn't something that could be taken away from him just because he wanted to. Even the hundreds of small countries that were dependent on Sky Dragon were rudely put under the jurisdiction of Daqin by Qin Hao. Did he really think that Bu Xiangqin's family had left him alone to thank Qin Hao for his kindness? Wrong. The reason why Qin Hao could annex the affiliated states of the two big countries without bloodshed was that Yi Longyuan had secretly opened up all the connections for Qin Hao. He even issued an edict for this reason, acknowledging the existence of Daqin in western Liang. Even Luo Shui, the strongest country in western Liang, had acknowledged the existence of Daqin. Of course, western Zhao State, Great Wei, and the rising Sky Dragon State did not dare to say a word. If he didn't, wouldn't he look down on Yi Longyuan? Wouldn't Yi Longyuan's words be nonsense? The reason why he was so protective of Qin Hao was that the other party was his son's good brother. Thank you for your care. I'll remember it. Qin Hao cast a grateful look. Yi Longyuan was indeed a good person. He was willing to give up his territory for his son. This was absolutely impossible in front of other emperors. It was not until today that Qin Hao understood that Luo Shui's goodwill was not because of Yao Lao, but because of Emperor Longyuan. Don't be in a hurry to thank me. Now it's time for you to repay me. Speaking of which, I should cut you into pieces first. Open it and see for yourself. Yi Longyuan picked up a rough wooden box on the dragon table and threw it into Qin Hao's arms. At this moment, Yi Longyuan's face was full of strong anger. The anger came from his stomach. Qin Hao immediately opened it to take a look. As a result, he was absent-minded at first glance. There was a finger inside. It was cut off from Shuihen's hand. Yi Longyuan said hoarsely. His fists were full of blue veins. Bang! Qin Hao grabbed the wooden box with his powerful palm and crushed it into pieces. He raised his cold eyes and roared. Who did this to Duan Shuihen's finger? Qin Hao's shout was extremely loud. His outburst of emotions startled Yi Longyuan, who was sitting upright. He felt that there was an emperor's aura surging towards him. This aura was unbearably majestic, causing him to feel somewhat deranged. Yuan Tianzai, Yi Longyuan let out a long breath. He was very satisfied with Qin Hao's reaction. From this, it could be seen that he did treat his son as a good brother. You must be familiar with this name, right? He continued to ask. It's the ancestor of the Yuan Huai family of Tianlong country, Yuan Huai's grandfather. Qin Hao was gnashing his teeth in hatred, but he could not figure out why Yuan Tianzai was still alive. After the Battle of the Crimson Peak Mountain Canyon, Qin Hao had wiped out the elites of the Yuan family. The Tianlong royal family should have taken this opportunity to wipe out the Yuan family. That old bastard ran away by luck. The whole Yuan family was wiped out, but he ran away alone. I'll kill his ancestors. Seeing Qin Hao's confusion, Yi Longyuan replied and slapped the dragon table fiercely. The dragon table made of purple gold was punched into a hole by his palm, and he did not use any of his primordial qi. He ran away? Qin Hao frowned. Yes, he ran away. At this time, Yao Lao said in confusion, but I don't understand why he didn't go to Daqin first and wipe out the Qin family. Instead, he sneaked to Luo Shui and took Shuihan away when he was not paying attention. What do you mean by running to my house first and wiping out the Qin family first? Qin Hao rolled his eyes at Yao Lao. If it were not for their friendship, he would have scolded this old man. However, Qin Hao could completely imagine that it was not that Yuan Tianzai did not go to Daqin, but that he did. However, after Daqin was established, the Qin family moved to Jinling City and designated Jinling City as the imperial city of Daqin. Jinling City was the home of the Sword Young Master's family, and there were many experts there. With the protection of the Sword Young Master's grandfather and father, how could Yuan Tianzai have the chance to attack? Therefore, Qin Hao expected that Yuan Tianzai would target the people closest to him. Coincidentally, it was Yi Shuihan and Xiaogua. Xiaogua was also in Jinling City, so Yuan Tianzai did not have the chance to attack. Then, the unlucky person became Yi Shuihan. I really can't imagine. What kind of medicine did he take? How dare he attack your son? How dare he attack the only prince of Luo Shui's emperor? This old bastard Yuan Tianzai really dared to do it. He is simply courting death. For some reason, Qin Hao suddenly wanted to laugh. Although he did not have a conscience, after seeing Yi Longyuan's dark face, he really wanted to laugh. A person whose whole family was wiped out. His son, grandson, and branch were all eradicated. He has nothing. He is not even afraid of death. He only wants revenge. Tell me, is there anything in this world that he does not dare to do? Chapter 608. Qin Hao nodded speechlessly. Yuan Tianzai had no intention of keeping Yi Long Yuan's son alive. He wasn't even afraid of death, so there was nothing he didn't dare to do. It's my fault for being careless. That mad dog took advantage of me and made Shui Han suffer. Yi Long Yuan was full of self-blame and frustration. He had always thought that Yi Shuihan was safe in the Luo Shui imperial city. No one would dare to harm his son under his nose, not to mention that Old Man Huang was secretly protecting Yi Shuihan. Old Man Huang's son had been severely injured by Yuan Tianzai. If Yao Lao hadn't found him in time, he would have died long ago. Now, the only person who could save Yi Shuihan was Qin Hao. Rather than saving him, it was more accurate to say that Qin Hao had to use himself to exchange for Yi Shuihan's life. Yuan Tianzai only wanted Qin Hao to die, and to die a horrible death. Where did he want to meet me? Qin Hao asked. He had already guessed that Yuan Tianzai was taking revenge on him. After kidnapping Shuihan, Yuan Tianzai hid in the Dark Night Forest and said that he wanted you to go alone. If you don't, you can kill Shuihan with a single thought. Yi Long Yuan's eyes twitched as he explained. Yuan Tianzai was very smart. He knew that no matter where he hid, he wouldn't be safe. Yi Long Yuan was an Emperor Realm expert. A single sweep of his consciousness was enough to cover the entire Luo Shui Empire. At that time, he would be able to capture Yuan Tianzai's location and save Yi Shuihan effortlessly. However, Yi Long Yuan couldn't do anything to him if he hid in the Dark Night Forest. The Dark Night Forest was an extremely mysterious and dangerous place. It was second only to the Exploding Flame mountain range and the Medicine Valley. It was located 100,000 li north of the city, very close to the Starry Moon Academy. The reason why the Starry Moon Academy was located north of the Imperial City was to guard against the demonic beasts in the Dark Night Forest. For the sake of Shuihan's safety, I can't take the risk to accompany you. No one can. So, I'm sorry, kid. Forgive me for my helplessness. For the sake of his son, Yi Long Yuan could only let Qin Hao go alone. Regarding this, Yao Lao was helpless. After all, Yi Shuihan was weak. If he fell into Yuan Tianzai's hands, he could kill Yi Shuihan 10,000 times with just a flick of his little finger. If that's the case, I'll head to the Forest of Darkness immediately. Goodbye. Since it was related to his brother's life, Qin Hao turned around and left without even frowning. Wait, Yi Long Yuan was shocked. He did not expect Qin Hao to be so straightforward. Are you really willing to exchange your life for Shuihan's return? He is not only your son, but also my brother. Qin Hao turned around and smiled, his expression resolute. Kid, think carefully. Yuan Tianzai is just an ant in the eyes of me and his majesty. But in front of you, he is the unshakable heavens. The difference between your cultivation is too great. If you go, you will die without a doubt. Yao Lao secretly clenched his fists, struggling in his heart. Qin Hao was a student and a young man he admired. And then, Qin Hao asked indifferently, was there any other way? Maybe you think I'm heartless, but I'm not heartless. I have a peerless Yuan burst pill here. After consuming it, it can raise the cultivation of a mortal saint by 1 realm. Listen carefully, an entire realm. As he spoke, Yi Long Yuan took out a blood-red medicinal pill that was so red that it penetrated purple. It emitted an incomparably lush medicinal fragrance. He knew that Qin Hao's methods were extraordinary. During the 4 Great Academies New Star competition, Yi Long Yuan had seen Qin Hao's performance. What he meant was that even if he couldn't accompany Qin Hao, he had to consider the other party's safety and make all the necessary preparations. With your cultivation of a 5th rank mortal saint, consuming this pill will allow you to erupt with the power of a 5th rank profound sage. Of course, it will only last for a quarter of an hour, and there will be repercussions. You won't be able to move for a month. Yuan Tianzai is an 8th rank profound sage, so you might not be able to escape death. But in addition to this peerless Yuan burst pill, I will give you another one. I will also give you some defensive saint artifacts and magical treasures. Yi Longyuan explained. He shook his spatial ring, preparing to take out some equipment. As long as Qin Hao exchanged Yi Shuihan from Yuan Tianzai's hands and could last for 5 breaths without dying. No, 3 breaths would be enough. At that time, Yi Longyuan would be able to break through the haze of the dark night forest, lock on a Qin Hao's position, and directly teleport over. No, no, no. If even you can think of it, how could Yuan Tianzai not think of it? Qin Hao shook his head. Yuan Tianzai definitely wouldn't let him bring his spatial ring over. Also, preparing these equipment and pills is completely unnecessary. Yuan Tianzai won't even last for a breath in my hands. Qin Hao said. Crack, rumble. Yi Longyuan and Yao Lao both glared at him. Ignorant, truly ignorant. Are you crazy, brat? Kid, your tone is too arrogant. You should know that you're just a trash mortal saint. Even if you won the Rising Star competition and defeated Tian Shuch's grandson, it doesn't change the fact that you're just an ant mortal saint. Quickly recognize the truth, Diao Si. Give him a life-saving magical treasure. Yao Lao pointed at Qin Hao. They hadn't seen each other for more than 2 months, and this kid had become arrogant again. In this regard, Yi Longyuan also acted like a child who couldn't be taught. Well, if that's the case, I'll accept your magical treasure and the energy explosion pill. Qin Hao turned around and took the energy explosion pill. Then, he threw a pile of small items that Yi Longyuan had poured on the dragon table into his spatial ring. How can I not accept the gift when you're forcing me to accept it? In the end, Qin Hao cupped his hands and bowed. I'm going with the attitude of death. If I really die, I hope that your majesty will take care of Da Qin. In addition, give them some land, such as the more than 50 countries in the Bai Ling mountain range in the west of Luoshui. No problem. Yi Longyuan nodded and agreed. His heart was boiling with blood, and he was extremely touched. Seeing Qin Hao going to die, he also felt very uncomfortable in his heart. His son was his son, but other people's children were not children, right? But he had no choice, because the news of Ishuihan's disappearance had not reached Xianqiue's ears yet. Otherwise, if that pancake-selling woman found out, she would definitely tear Yi Longyuan's face apart and run to the palace to fight with him. And Yao Lao, if I die, please don't take away my spot to enter the Medicine Valley. Let Wadi go on my behalf. Of course, if I don't die, you have to give me another spot, Qin Hao said with a chuckle. That's not a problem at all. Yao Lao also nodded, 2 drops of tears falling from the corner of his eyes. This kid was loyal and righteous, and the old man's heart was deeply touched. I'll go too. Buzz. Qin Hao spread out a pair of fire wings and flew out of the imperial study. The aura of a heavenly saint expert was released from his body, causing the sky above the palace to buzz. F*CK. What's going on? Yi Longyuan was dumbfounded. I don't know either, but judging from the strength of that brat's origin chi, he has reached the level of a 5th stage heavenly saint. Yao Lao looked at Yi Longyuan in a daze, his face filled with disbelief. 2 months ago, Qin Hao was only a mortal saint. In the blink of an eye, he had become a heavenly saint? And that flame aura, it was not the primordial fire of a cultivator at all. But what exactly was that thing? F*CK, my exploding yuan pill and immortal binding lock. Qin Hao, I'm not done with you. Yi Longyuan was stunned for a long time before he reacted. He cursed and kicked the table, turning it upside down. He had been tricked by Qin Hao. Qin Hao had broken through to the heavenly saint realm, yet he was still full of nonsense and had an attitude of death. Poor Yi Longyuan had to give up his land and lose a bunch of treasures. Although he was unwilling in his heart, at this moment, Yao Lao and Yi Longyuan both revealed smiles on their faces. Because if Qin Hao went, the one who would die would most likely be Yuan Tianzai. They lamented that Qin Hao's growth speed was too ridiculous. Dark Night Forest. It was shrouded in fog all year round, like poisonous smoke that would not dissipate. Regardless of whether it was the plants or animals in the forest, they were all dark attribute species. It was difficult for living people to get close. The air inside was incomparably turbid and filled with a moldy smell. Ancient trees covered the sky, so it was named Dark Night and Forest of Death. Only cultivators who had reached a certain level of cultivation could avoid being corroded by the fog. It was an extremely dangerous place. After leaving the Luo Shui Imperial Palace, Qin Hao took out a broom from his interspatial ring in order to not exhaust his origin chi and clamped it under his crotch. This broom was obtained from Wei de Bao. It was originally a rare flying artifact of Murong Zijuan of Northern Yen. Riding this broom, Qin Hao realized that it was extraordinary. Its speed was quite fast, not much slower than a King-grade treasure ship flying at full speed. The journey of 100,000 miles did not take much time. Qin Hao had already landed at the edge of the Dark Night Forest. "Brother dog, can you smell the cold water?" Qin Hao asked softly. The dog spirit had suffered heavy injuries from Dugu, Xuanxiao's palm strike, so it retreated back into the interspatial ring to recuperate. Qin Hao was naturally an expert when it came to identifying the smell of medicinal herbs. However, when it came to tracking people's aura, it was not as sharp as the dog spirit's nose. Roar Wu, the dog spirit's whimpering came from the interspatial ring, which meant that it could not smell anything. It seems that the fog in the Dark Night Forest is indeed a very evil thing. Since that was the case, Qin Hao chose to walk forward. With the first step, faint sparks spread out from his body, isolating him from the fog. The interior of the Dark Night Forest was very dim. One could only see about 5 meters in front of them. Within this range, there were wisps of decaying black smoke that looked like ghosts drifting back and forth. It made one's hair stand on end. Not long after Qin Hao stepped in, he was immediately attacked by many dark creatures. Most of them were dark beasts, but there were also some strange man-eating vines and man-eating flowers. But in the end, they all died to the red lotus flame. "Yuan Tianzai, I'm Qin Hao. I'm here," Qin Hao shouted as he walked. His voice rumbled in the dark space, not afraid of attracting high-level demonic beasts. As he went deeper and deeper, climbing over mountain after mountain, his expression turned grave. The ranks of the dark creatures he encountered were correspondingly higher. On the other hand, Qin Hao dispersed the red lotus flame and used ordinary yuan qi to block the fog. If his cultivation was too strong, it would cause Yuan Tianzai to be wary, and it would be inconvenient for him to save Dugu Xianxiao. Qin Hao decided to play the pig to eat the tiger. As he went deeper, Qin Hao gathered his emperor-grade mental strength and vaguely sensed the existence of a special aura. It was not the dark creatures of the Dark Night Forest, but the aura of a living person. Chapter 609. On the other hand, Qin Hao's every move was exposed to the enemy's eyes. He saw an old man sitting cross-legged in a swamp and behind a small hill. On a small open ground that was rarely seen, there was an old man sitting cross-legged. The old man was dressed in extraordinary attire. Judging from the material of his clothes, they must have been very expensive, indicating that he used to have a high status. But after escaping from the Sky Dragon Kingdom and hiding in the Forest of Gloom for half a month, Yuan Tianzai's clothes were torn and tattered. Strips of cloth hung from his body, making him look like a beggar. He hadn't washed his hair for a long time, so it was dirty and messy. "Little bastard, you're finally here." Yuan Tianzai gnashed his teeth, hatred shooting out of his triangular eyes. In front of him floated a giant bronze mirror as tall as a man. This bronze mirror was called the Mirror of Yin-Yang Creation, a decent low-grade saint artifact. Although it didn't have any offensive power, its peeping ability was quite strong. At that moment, Qin Hao's figure was reflected in the Yin-Yang Creation mirror. Due to the distance, Qin Hao's figure was hazy and blurry. "Ah, mirror, mirror, make his face clearer so that I can see it more clearly and make it easier for old man to vent his hatred." Yuan Tianzai chanted an incantation, clasped his hands together, and made a bunch of messy hand seals. Then he shouted, "Light up! Buzz! This magic mirror!" Oh no! The mirror of good fortune shone brightly, and the image on it immediately became clear. Qin Hao's handsome appearance was revealed without a doubt. He had a refined ponytail, a fair face, a straight nose, and a well-proportioned figure. "You're even more handsome than old man when he was young. If I don't kill you, who am I supposed to kill?" Yuan Tianzai roared in jealousy. At this moment, Qin Hao in the mirror had entered the swamp and was being attacked by the dark creatures of the swamp. These creatures of darkness were like toads. Their bodies were huge, even bigger than coconuts. Their appearances were very strange. They had 3 legs and 1 eye. The eye grew on their forehead like a light bulb. At this moment, countless toads continuously emerged from the quagmire. The eyes on their heads lit up one after another, shooting out rays of poison from their eyes. They were like black arrows, attacking Qin Hao in a dense pack. Qin Hao resisted with incomparable difficulty. Resisting was very difficult, and it seemed like he was unfortunately hit by 2 arrows. Not long after, his lips turned purple and his complexion turned black. It was obvious that he had been poisoned by the toad. "Ha ha! This little idiot is really stupid." For someone else, he dared to enter the dark night forest alone. The toads in the swamp are very powerful. Even the old man is somewhat afraid of them. He actually dared to barge in openly. He really doesn't know life from death. What an idiot. Yuan Tianzai was overjoyed to see Qin Hao being poisoned and suffering more and more injuries. Then, he slowly turned his head and looked at the young man, trapped in a tree nearby. It was Yi Shuihan. Yi Shuihan was covered in wounds. The extent of his ruptured flesh was too horrible to look at. He no longer had his noble temperament and had been ravaged beyond recognition. His body was wrapped in a bunch of snake-like vines. These vines grew from the tree and were extremely poisonous. They could even suck blood. At this moment, the vines had pierced into his limbs and bones. They were greedily sucking Yi Shuihan's flesh and blood, then injecting poison into his body to numb his nerves. In other words, Yi Shuihan wouldn't be able to survive. You still want to save people? Not a chance. Today, I will have all of you die without a burial ground and accompany my entire family. Yuan Tianzai coldly snorted at Yi Shuihan. Before this, he didn't know that Yi Shuihan was the son of Dragon Abyss Great Emperor. It was only after Old Man Huang's son was seriously injured that he revealed the truth, hoping to scare Yuan Tianzai away. But who knew that this only made Yuan Tianzai even crazier? At first, he was worried that Qin Hao wouldn't come to this terrifying dark night forest for Yi Shuihan. But now, he firmly believed that Qin Hao would come. If he didn't, Yulong Yuan wouldn't let Qin Hao live. In fact, as expected, Qin Hao really did come. Whoa, whoa. Yi Shuihan looked at Qin Hao in the yin-yang mirror, who was being attacked by a large number of poisonous toads. He let out an anxious whimper. He couldn't speak. A smelly sock was stuffed into his mouth. Seeing Qin Hao's injuries increasing in order to save him, Yi Shuihan was burning with anxiety and heartache. It's painful, isn't it? Compared to this old man's pain of having his sect exterminated, your pain is nothing. This is just the beginning. The best is yet to come. Yuan Tianzai patted his butt and stood up. He looked at the yin-yang mirror again and was surprised. At some point in time, the Qin Hao in a mirror had actually crossed the swamp. In that short moment of distraction, Yuan Tianzai didn't see what method he'd used. This surprised Yuan Tianzai a little, but it was to be expected. The poisonous toads in the swamp were roughly equivalent to a first-rank mortal saint. What was terrifying about them was their sheer numbers. From the information he gathered, Qin Hao was a 5th-rank mortal saint. It was inevitable that he'd make it through. However, it was a pity that passing through this stage seemed to be Qin Hao's limit. Yuan Tianzai could already see that Qin Hao's body was swollen. This meant that the poison was too deep. It's time to harvest. Putting away the mirror, Yuan Tianzai let out a sigh of relief. It seemed that Qin Hao didn't have any trump cards. He was just a trash mortal saint. Then the slaughter would officially begin. At this moment, he cut off the vines on the tree and dragged Yi Shuihan forward as if he was leading a dog. There was a cruel smile on his face. At the edge of the swamp, Qin Hao's entire body was covered in mud. He appeared to be in a sorry state as he lay on the ground, panting heavily. If it weren't for the fact that my body isn't ordinary, even a profound sage would be crippled after being shot so many times by the poisonous toads. He sighed at the strength of the poisonous toads. The Forest of Darkness was much more dangerous than the inner area of the explosive Flame Mountain Range. Qin Hao picked up the purple meteorite sword and staggered to his feet. After making it through the swamp, he'd killed more than 1,000 poisonous toads. It wasn't surprising that Yuan Tianzai was shocked. After all, that was equivalent to killing more than 1,000 low-level mortal saints. When Qin Hao got up, his eyes inadvertently glanced at a pile of grass. He sensed that there was a tiny spirit formation core hidden in the grass. In fact, along the way, Qin Hao had discovered many spirit array cores. These things had the effect of surveillance. It wasn't hard to guess that Yuan Tianzai had left them behind to observe Qin Hao's movements and his true cultivation. Qin Hao had beaten Yuan Tianzai at his own game. He'd purposely followed the spirit array cores hidden in the darkness so that he could find Yuan Tianzai. At this moment, he felt that the two weak auras were gradually approaching. It seemed that the enemy was right in front of him. Chapter 610. It didn't take long for Qin Hao to emerge from the swamp and arrive at the hilly area. Soon, they met up. Before the meeting, Yuan Tianzai purposely teased Qin Hao once more. To be more precise, it was a test. This was a depression in the hilly area with a deep river flowing through it. When Qin Hao arrived, he was greeted by the sight of a large black deer flying over and smashing into him. The black deer had been killed and its innards dug out. Fresh blood splattered all over Qin Hao's body, and the stench of blood permeated the air, stirring up the river. A few bubbles emerged from the river with a gurgling sound. The water splashed and exploded. A dark-colored python, as thick as a man's waist, soared out. Its round body was covered with creepy patterns. It opened its huge mouth and tried to swallow Qin Hao. Qin Hao was in a panic. He let out a cry of fright as he narrowly dodged the bite. However, the python was extremely agile. Its whip-like tail lashed out and struck Qin Hao's body with a thump, sending him flying over 10 meters before crashing to the ground. Qin Hao couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood and drop the purple meteorite sword. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the python was extremely excited. It flew up once more and tried to swallow Qin Hao. Whoosh! Suddenly, a surge of energy shot out from the darkness and struck the python's mouth. The energy was so powerful that it blasted the python into a headless corpse. Qin Hao thus luckily escaped with his life, but all his bones seemed to have been shattered and he couldn't get up. Ha! I thought you were some kind of genius, but in old man's eyes, you're just a piece of trash that can't even withstand a single blow. As he spoke, Yuan Tianzai arrogantly crawled out from the bushes with a vine in his hand. As if he was leading a dog, he pulled out the powerless Yi Shuihan and kicked him to the ground. This time, Qin Hao and Yi Shuihan could be said to be fellow sufferers. Both of them were covered in scars as they crawled on the ground. For pairs of eyes looked at each other from afar, revealing the sorrow of being at the end of the road. Yi Shuihan, in particular, had tears in his eyes and was making muffled noises. He couldn't speak with his sock stuffed in his mouth. However, Qin Hao understood the look in his eyes. It was as if he was saying, "I'm sorry, boss. I drag you into this. You shouldn't have come to save me. Don't worry, as long as I'm alive, I won't let anything happen to you." Qin Hao forced a smile and pushed himself up. He looked coldly at Yuan Tianzai. "You're Yuan Huai's grandfather, Yuan Ye's father, the patriarch of the Yuan family, the Grand Duke of Tianlong Kingdom, Yuan Tianzai." It was a long and mighty title. As soon as he spoke, Yuan Tianzai's arrogance became even more unbridled. However, after his pride, Yuan Tianzai's body trembled violently. He gritted his teeth and said viciously, "That's right, I'm the unparalleled Grand Duke, Yuan Tianzai. Of course, that was in the past. Now, I'm just an old man with one foot in the grave. You ruined my family. An old man whose entire family was wiped out. As he spoke, Yuan Tianzai's eyes were bloodshot, as if they were about to bleed. It was Qin Hao who had killed the genius grandson he was so proud of, the only successor of the Yuan family. It was Qin Hao who had wiped out the Yuan family's expedition army. More than 5 million elites had died in Crimson Peak Canyon. That was the foundation of the Yuan family. It was also because of Qin Hao that the Yuan family, which had been flourishing day by day and was about to replace the Sky Dragon royal family, collapsed in a single night. None of the family members were spared, and they were all massacred. Yuan Tianzai was the only one left to live in this world. His wealth, status, and power of the past were all gone. All that was left was hatred, a hatred that reached the heavens. I can't imagine how my grandson died at the hands of a piece of trash like you. Look at you, you're just like a dog. If my grandson were still alive, his cultivation would be higher than yours. I can't imagine what kind of despicable means you used to wipe out the expedition army led by my son. Poor men of my Yuan family. You shamelessly killed them. You are nothing but a scumbag. What I can't imagine is that you've hooked up with the Tianlong imperial family. What made the third princess, Bu Xiangqin, look at you in a different light? You're nothing in old man's eyes. If I were a few decades younger, Bu Xiangqin would have fallen in love with old man. In short, you're nothing in my eyes. You're nothing but a dog. Yuan Tianzai jabbered on, spitting out all the words that came from the bottom of his heart. It had to be said that his tone and demeanor were exactly the same as Yuan Huai, who thought of himself as a cut above the rest. It was also the first time they met that he declared that Qin Hao was worse than a pig or a dog. I'm trash. I'm sorry, but I'm trash. I killed your grandson. Doesn't that mean your grandson is even more trash? I shamelessly killed your Yuan family's army? You have a nerve to say that? More than 5 million people formed an alliance army and dragged in Fengyue country, Valiant country, and Beiwu country to attack our little Daqin prefecture. Who's the shameless one here? As for you being more handsome than me, forget about me. But you have a face full of wrinkles. You're already so old. Why are you still trying to act cute and act like a little fresh meat? Cut the crap. Let my brother go, and I'll let you do whatever you want with me. Qin Hao replied righteously. The winner takes all. Nothing is too deceitful on the battlefield. Besides, Qin Hao won with his true cultivation. He didn't use any tricks. Sob, sob. Yishuehan shook his head eagerly when he heard Qin Hao say that he was going to trade him for him. In fact, Yishuehan wanted to say, Boss, hurry up and leave. You're no match for Yuan Tianzai. Even if Qin Hao defeated Yuan Tianzai, he wouldn't be able to save Yishuehan. Yishuehan was currently extremely weak. He had been sucked dry by the cannibal vines for 10 days and 10 nights. The poison had seeped into his bones and was incurable. 80% of his life force was gone. He was truly at the end of the road. Qin Hao was trading himself for someone else. It was a losing trade. Fine. You got a sharp tongue. Let's see how long you can keep it up. Yuan Tianzai was so angry that he said fine 3 times. He pointed at Qin Hao and said, Now, throw your sword over. Then, take off your spatial ring and throw it into old man's hands. Finally, take off all your clothes. Yuan Tianzai had seen Qin Hao's performance in the tenebrous forest through the yin-yang creation mirror. In terms of strength, there was no need for him to fear the other party. However, since he was able to sit in the position of Duke Garrison, his mind was shrewd and ruthless. He was afraid that Qin Hao might have some treasures hidden in his spatial ring. It was better to be careful. Thump! Qin Hao's heart skipped a beat, and his expression froze. As expected, this old thing was indeed shrewd. Look, he was much shrewder than Yi Longyuan. No matter how many treasures he prepared, it was useless. He had to take off his pants. Hee, are you afraid? Yuan Tianzai's eyes narrowed, as if he had seen through Qin Hao's scheme. He was certain that the other party's spatial ring was hiding some powerful killing weapon. Did you hear that? Throw your spatial ring over and take off all your clothes for old man to deal with. Otherwise, I'll crush your brother to death right now. Yuan Tianzai gave the order fearfully. He then condensed a ball of yuan qi in his palm and made a gesture of killing Yishuehan. Wait. Qin Hao stopped him inside. Fine, I'll take it off and give it all to you. He then shook his head. There were indeed many treasures hidden in his spatial ring. Apart from treasures, there was also this dog's spirit. Chapter 611. Yi Shuai-han shook his head in grief and indignation, his face streaked with tears of humiliation. In order to save him, his boss had ventured into tenebrous forest alone, leaving him covered in wounds and humiliated by Yuan Tianzai. This was a great humiliation for a man. If it were Yi Shuai-han himself, he wouldn't be able to live anymore. Actually, I should have you cripple your Dantian first, then cut off your limbs. However, this old man must personally cut off your limbs and cripple your Dantian. Only then will I be able to vent my hatred. Immediately take off your clothes. Yuan Tianzai ordered through clenched teeth as Qin Hao took off his white robes. Qin Hao then took off his shirt, revealing his well-built body. His muscles were clearly visible, and his Apollo's belt was visible. Pants, take off your pants too. Yuan Tianzai ordered again, his tone brimming with jealousy. A young man's figure was truly amazing. In response, Qin Hao took off his pants as well. Take off your pants too. If you don't, I'll crush him. Yuan Tianzai was afraid that Yi Shuai-han might have a weapon hidden in his pants, so he lifted Yi Shuai-han up and choked him by the neck. Yi Shuai-han was almost out of breath. Are you sure you wanted to take off my pants? This time, Qin Hao didn't take them off. Cut the crap. Old man told you to take them off, so take them off for me. Yuan Tianzai raised his nose. Fine, but don't regret it. After he finished speaking, Qin Hao took off his last concealment item and stood naked in front of the other party. His performance was magnanimous and arrogant. Fuck. Yuan Tianzai's gaze fell on Qin Hao, his eyes filled with shock and shame. I didn't think that you'd be so well endowed. Old man has underestimated you. In all honesty, Yuan Tianzai was both ashamed of his inferiority and envious. Now, throw your sword and spatial ring over. Yuan Tianzai continued to give orders. He was already certain that Qin Hao had no hidden weapons on him. Qin Hao stood there like a little lamb, weak and powerless. Alas, seeing Yuan Tianzai's pig-like behavior, Qin Hao shook his head and took off his spatial ring, tossing along with the purple meteorite sword. This was not an ordinary spatial ring, but a divine weapon transformed from the Great Void Divine Cauldron. However, Qin Hao was not worried at all. In the hands of Yuan Tianzai, the Great Void Cauldron would not be of any use. After all, he needed the immortal Samsara incantation to activate the Great Void Cauldron. Woo-woo, the moment Qin Hao removed the interspatial ring, Yi Shuai-han started to struggle violently. He knew that without the spatial ring, Qin Hao no longer had anything to rely on. He was like a fish on a chopping board. Ah, you are so stupid. Yuan Tianzai laughed without restraint. He tossed Yi Shuai-han aside like he was trash and took the purple meteorite sword and the spatial ring. Then, he flicked the body of the sword, making a ding sound. His eyes shone with admiration. Good sword, he exclaimed excitedly. The sword's material could be classified as a low-grade holy weapon, and it seemed to have the potential to be upgraded. It was an extremely rare and valuable treasure. After praising the treasured sword, he probed the spatial ring with his mind. Then he was stunned. Following that, his body trembled violently. You actually have so many treasures. This is an entire set of saint equipment. His voice trembled as if he were about to cry. He took out his holy war suit as he spoke. Qin Hao had taken the holy war suit from Dugaji. There was the holy war divine sword, holy war bracers, holy war knee pads, holy war boots, holy war treasured armor, cape, and even a helmet. I've never seen such good equipment in my life. Now that I can wear it, I can die with no regrets. Yuan Tianzai raised his head and wept. He was so excited that tears flowed down his cheeks. He was like a beggar who had picked up clothes thrown away by a rich family. He was filled with joy. However, he didn't wear it. Instead, he continued to check the spatial ring. This is the Yuan burst pill. Boom! Yuan Tianzai was shocked. He knew the effect of this pill. After taking it, one could erupt with the cultivation of a whole realm for 15 minutes. As a fifth-rank profound sage, he could erupt with the cultivation of a fifth-rank heavenly sage. This pill was priceless. It was priceless. I've never seen such a high-quality pill in my life. It's actually a peerless Yuan burst pill. I can die with no regrets. Yuan Tianzai looked up to the sky and wept. Qin Hao looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot. Yi Shuihan, on the other hand, was extremely heartbroken. He blamed himself even more and was filled with guilt. If not for him, Qin Hao wouldn't have lost so many treasures. However, in the next moment, Qin Hao also lost his life. This is the Earth Overturning Seal. It's something that only a mid-rank elder of Dangu can have. I'm rich. Not only can I die with no regrets, but I can also die with a smile on my face. It's worth it even if I'm chopped into pieces and fed to the dogs. Following a loud cry, Yuan Tianzai found the Earth Overturning Seal. Dangu was a peak existence in the western Liang continent. The Earth Overturning Seal it produced was a treasure among treasures. Apart from being used as a weapon, it also symbolized the user's noble status. Continue. There's more inside. Qin Hao crossed his arms and said casually. His expression was as if he was mocking Yuan Tianzai. Old man, I won't continue watching. If I do, I might die from excitement. Therefore, I've decided to kill you right now to avenge my grandson and son. First, I'll cripple your Dantian. Yuan Tianzai's expression changed. Suddenly, he fiercely attacked, not giving anyone time to react. His palm was wrapped in vigorous, profound Saint Origin Qi, and it smashed toward Qin Hao like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Seeing this scene, Yi Shuihan crazily rolled on the ground. He couldn't bear to see his boss being killed by Yuan Tianzai. However, it seemed that no one could stop this tragedy from happening. Bang! This palm ruthlessly smashed onto Qin Hao's body. It was hard to block. The ground shook, and a layer of spider webs appeared on the ground where Qin Hao was standing. Moreover, smoke and dust rose. However, there was no scream, and Qin Hao wasn't sent flying out of the smoke and dust. Thump! Yuan Tianzai's heart skipped a beat. What's going on? His palm had clearly hit something, and he hadn't missed. Is this all you've got? You're really useless. As the smoke and dust settled, Qin Hao calmly appeared. One of his hands was behind his back, while the other had collided with Yuan Tianzai's palm. His expression was relaxed, and he wasn't injured at all. How is this possible? Yuan Tianzai was shocked at first. His eyes widened, and then he felt that something was wrong. He immediately retreated and pointed at Qin Hao in disbelief. Weren't you poisoned? Chapter 612. Judging from the strength of Qin Hao's energy, there were no signs of poisoning. Poison? Qin Hao shrugged, then clenched his fists and stomped on the ground with his right foot. Bang! A fiery light flickered on his body, followed by a green poison that spread out like flour and disappeared into the air. The poison is gone now, he said indifferently. Yuan Tianzai was shocked. Qin Hao had actually forced the poison out of his body and dispersed it. His ability was very impressive. If it had been Yuan Tianzai who had been poisoned, it wouldn't have been easy for him to force the toad poison out. It seems that I've underestimated you. You are indeed extraordinary. Unfortunately, what's the use of forcing the poison out of your body? In front of old man's overwhelming strength, you're just an insignificant piece of trash. If I want to die, you'll die. Kneel down for this second palm strike. After recovering from his shock, Yuan Tianzai calmed down and launched a second palm strike. The strength of his second palm strike rose to the level of a profound sage. He was sure that Qin Hao would be crippled after this. Rumble. Qin Hao also launched a second palm strike, blocking the opponent's attack. His feet firmly planted on the ground, his body as still as a mountain, looking very relaxed. On the other hand, Yuan Tianzai retreated a dozen steps, each step leaving a deep footprint in ground. He was in a very sorry state. How is this possible? This time, Yuan Tianzai wasn't just surprised, but also very serious. The destructive power of that palm strike was enough to cripple a fifth-rank profound sage, let alone a mere mortal sage. If Qin Hao had taken it so easily, didn't that mean that his true cultivation wasn't much weaker than Yuan Tianzai's? It was also at this moment that Yuan Tianzai seemed to have seen through Qin Hao's intentions. The other party was pretending to be weak. Yi Shuihan, who was watching the battle from the side, was shocked. In fact, he had already been shocked after the first palm strike. Now, he was even more shocked. Could it be? Boss's cultivation had increased explosively during this time. This was Yi Shuihan's conjecture. For the first time, his worried eyes revealed a hint of joy. Brat, you've been pretending to be weak from the beginning to the end. How dare you lie to me? Yuan Tianzai's hatred surged. With a whoosh, he took out Qin Hao's violet meteorite sword. The worry on his face vanished, replaced by a sinister smile. But the older, the wiser. Now that you're defenseless and your weapons and treasures are in my hands, I'll use your sword to kill you. Isn't that ironic? Die. He decisively struck out with his sword. The sword light was like a poisonous snake leaving its hole. It shot out in a perfectly straight line, emitting a hissing sound. He no longer dared to be careless. This time, he used all his strength to kill Qin Hao with a single strike. He could faintly feel that Qin Hao was very difficult to deal with. Ding! There was a soft cry. The silver-glowing violet meteorite sword stabbed in front of Qin Hao, but it was firmly caught between two fingers. Moreover, he only used one hand. However, there were sparks around his fingers. Obviously, Qin Hao had used the red lotus fire. After all, the violet meteorite sword was made of very sharp material. No one knew his sword better than Qin Hao. What? Rumble. Yuan Tianzai felt a shocking explosion in his mind. He was dumbfounded. The first time he attacked, he used the mortal sage level, but it was blocked by Qin Hao. The second time, he used the profound sage level, but it was still futile. The third time, he used all his strength and even had a low-grade Saint artifact. However, Qin Hao disdainfully caught his sword with two fingers. At this moment, cold sweat slid down Yuan Tianzai's cheeks. His expression changed from surprise to shock, and now it was full of fear. His mouth was wider than a toad's. I didn't kill your grandson by luck. I didn't use any despicable methods to kill your son. I took off all my clothes and even gave you my spatial ring. It's not that I'm stupid, but I was worried about my brother's safety. I'll tell you the truth now. The real trash is not me, Qin Hao. It's your grandson, Yuan Huai, and your son, Yuan Yi. Today, it's your turn, Yuan Tianzai. If I can kill them, I can also kill you. You, on the other hand, are worse than a pig or a dog. After saying this, Qin Hao stretched out his left hand and punched Yuan Tianzai's chest with a bang. Surging heavenly sage power crazily exploded. Crack! The sound of bones cracking rang out. Yuan Tianzai spat out blood without restraint. His body flew backward, and the violet meteorite sword slid from his hand to his head. His face was filled with disbelief. His expression was terrifying to the extreme. Judging from this palm, Qin Hao's true cultivation was that of a heavenly sage. The one who was truly inferior to an ant and arrogant was him, Yuan Tianzai. He was the one who was stupid beyond redemption. It was also at this moment that a boundless aura of death enveloped him. The first thing Yuan Tianzai did after landing was to regain control of Yi Shuihan. Only by holding on to Yi Shuihan would he have a chance to survive. However, Qin Hao's reaction was even faster. His figure flickered, and water-wind god step appeared in front of Yi Shuihan, firmly protecting him. He also tore off the smelly sock in his opponent's mouth. Brother, I've made you suffer. Boss. Hot tears rolled down Yi Shuihan's cheeks. He could finally speak. His head was pressed against Qin Hao's chest, and he could not stop sobbing. His heart was in his throat. At this moment, he had too many things to say to Qin Hao. However, no matter how many words there were, they could not compare to the hatred in his heart. He clenched his teeth and raised his head. Kill him. Kill that old dog, Yuan. I want him dead. Don't worry. I'll let him have his wish. He won't have a good death, but he'll have no regrets. Even if I chop him up and feed him to the dogs, he'll still be smiling in the underworld. Qin Hao coldly turned around and looked at the pale-faced Yuan Tianzai. You little bastard. Old man has to admit that I miscalculated. You're really strong, and you've hidden your strength well. I'm not as good as you. My son and grandson are also not as good as you. They didn't die in vain. I can only sigh at old man's heroic reputation, but in the end, I fell in the hands of a junior like you. No, I still have a trump card. I have a Yuan burst pill. Ha ha. Yuan Tianzai suddenly remembered that Qin had a peerless Yuan burst pill in his spatial ring. After taking the Yuan burst pill, his cultivation would instantly rise to that of an 8th rank heavenly sage. Furthermore, he could sense that Qin Hao was only a 5th rank heavenly sage. This meant that he still had the ability to get rid of Qin Hao. Not only do I have the Yuan burst pill, but I also have a set of saint artifacts to protect me. Now, I'll wear your armor, eat your pill, and kill you. Only then will I be able to smile in the underworld. As he spoke, Yuan Tianzai put on Deguji's holy war armor without any regard for his own life. In an instant, he looked mighty. The holy war armor's size could shrink at will, and it was very suitable for anyone to wear. With the protection of a set of saint artifacts, no one below the king stage would be able to break through it. Then, he threw the Yuan burst pill into his mouth. Buzz! A monstrous aura gushed out of Yuan Tianzai's head, shooting straight into the clouds. The aura was so powerful that it even dispersed the fog within 100 meters. At this moment, Yuan Tianzai's cultivation had truly reached the 8th rank heavenly sage level. He was like an unshakable mountain. Little bastard, it's your turn to be shocked this time, right? You're also very surprised, right? Ha ha! Yuan Tianzai felt his strength surging like never before. This strength gave him confidence, and he no longer feared Qin Hao. On the contrary, he was 100% sure that he could kill Qin Hao. Boss, Yishui Han was once again on edge. Chapter 613. What a bluff. Let's prove who's going to die with our strength. Yuan Tianzai shouted and shot into the air. He held the sacred battle divine sword in his hand and spread his legs. He looked extremely flirtatious. At this moment, his aura surged to the extreme. It was obvious that he was preparing a big move. In just a few seconds, he raised the sword above his head and roared. First style, flowing clouds, startle heaven and earth, blast. Whoosh! The divine sword stirred up the wind and clouds, causing the world to change colors. A powerful hurricane swept through the forest, and rolling clouds fell from the sky. As Yuan Tianzai stabbed out with his sword, the clouds mixed with Yuan Qi turned into a giant sword that was 50 feet long. It stabbed toward Qin Hao with a world-destroying power. Its momentum was boundless. Mount. Looks good, but sword skills? Forgive me for being blunt, but you can go to hell and train for a few hundred more years. Qin Hao reached out, and the violet meteoric sword flew out from the ground. His eyes blazed with red lotus fire as he shouted, "Graceful sword!" Whoosh! The purple meteorite sword shot out like a cold dagger and met the giant sword head-on. The two swords collided with each other, causing a loud boom and a dazzling light to explode. After shattering the giant sword, the cold dagger of fire Yuan sword energy didn't lose momentum and pierced into Yuan Tianzai's chest. Ah! Yuan Tianzai screamed in pain as he fell from the sky like a bird that had been shot. How is this possible? I broke through to the 8th level at the last moment, but I can't even defeat a 5th level mortal Saint Junior? I can't accept this. I can't accept this. Yuan Tianzai was wearing the hallowed war armor. Although his chest wasn't pierced, the fire Yuan sword energy had penetrated, shattering his meridians and dispersing his cultivation. He was like a cripple now. You have no choice but to accept this in front of me. Besides, you don't have a right to wear armor. Qin Hao clenched his hand into a claw and sucked at Yuan Tianzai. Yuan Tianzai's crusade suit suddenly flashed with the light of inscriptions. As if summoned by Qin Hao, it disintegrated one by one and flew to Qin Hao. Under Qin Hao's command, the bracers, knee pads, cloak, and helmet were all placed on Yishuan's body one by one, forming layers of protection. On the Holy War suit, Qin had already cast a unique inscription on it. As long as it was within the coverage of his mental strength, it could automatically return in a moment. What capital are you talking about now? What trump card? Did he think that he would be fearless and lawless just because he had snatched something from someone else? Hee, you're just a clown? Qin Hao coldly walked in front of Yuan Tianzai. I hate it so much. Why did my Yuan family provoke a freak like you? The heavens are blind. Yuan Tianzai roared in grief and indignation. Not only did he fail to take revenge, he was even stabbed in the back. It's you who has eyes but can't see. Who gave you the guts to cut off one of my brother's fingers? Today I'll cut off all 10 of your fingers. Swoosh! With a flash of swordlight, Qin Hao cut off Yuan Tianzai's pinky finger. Swoosh! The second strike was the thumb. Swoosh! The third strike was the index finger. Swoosh! The fourth strike was the middle finger. Swoosh! 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 Sword light flashed incessantly, and Yuan Tianzai screamed in pain. This scene made Yi Shuihen's tears flow uncontrollably. At this moment, he deeply understood that his boss could have killed Yuan Tianzai with a single strike. He had been toying with Yuan Tianzai for so long in order to completely shatter his dignity. Besides, he was worried about Yi Shuihen's safety. Shuihan, cut him down. Qin Hao kicked. Bang! Yuan Tianzai, whose fingers had been cut off, was kicked to Yi Shuihen's feet. Old man. This old man died with a grievance. Although I'm unwilling, at least I can drag someone down with me. Ha! Laugh, I'll let you laugh. You can go to hell with a smile on your face for opposing my boss. Yi Shuihan was enraged. Using all his strength, he raised his holy war avatar and cut off Yuan Tianzai's dog head. He felt much more at ease as he let out a sigh of relief. But it was also at this moment that Yi Shuihen's mind relaxed and he fell down. Qin Hao saw this and twisted his aquafire step to support him. Boss, I'm sorry. I'm afraid you came here for nothing. I'm dead for sure. Ha! Yi Shuihan said weakly. His eyes were filled with reluctance. Of course, he wasn't willing to die. Don't speak. Qin Hao gathered qi in his palm and infused it into Yi Shuihen's body through his chest. At this moment, he began to examine his opponent's injuries. Qin Hao immediately frowned. Yi Shuihen's injuries weren't serious. What was truly fatal was the large amount of poison in his body. What was even more fatal was that his essence blood was almost completely drained. It was easy to imagine what kind of inhumane torture Yuan Tianzai had put him through during this period. I'm afraid I won't make it. Boss, help me pass on a message to Yi Longyuan. Tell him that I hate him. I'd rather not be his son. I'd rather. Yi Shuihen's words became more and more hurried. This was a sign of death. Go back and tell him yourself. Now shut up. Qin Hao roared. How could he allow his brother to die in his arms? That Denda was too useless. He sealed several of Yi Shuihen's acupoints to prevent the poison from spreading. Although the poison had almost seeped into his bones and meridians, it wasn't very effective. Fortunately, there seemed to be a sealing power in Yi Shuihen's body. That sealing power was still protecting a certain part of his soul power. In other words, Yi Shuihen still had a sliver of life. However, time was of the essence. He had to completely remove the poison in Yi Shuihen's body within a day. Normally, Qin Hao could use the Red Lotus Flame to purify Yi Shuihen, but he couldn't do so now because Yi Shuihen was too weak. I won't let you die. Even if I have to walk through the entire dark forest and kill all the monsters, I'll take you back from the hands of the King of Hell. I, Qin Hao, have the final say on my brother's life. Qin Hao said resolutely. He took out a set of clothes from his spatial ring and put them on. He had taken back the spatial ring when he cut off Yuan Tianzai's finger. There were a total of 3 rings. One belonged to Qin Hao, one to Yi Shuihen, and the last to Yuan Tianzai. After putting away the 3 rings, Qin Hao tore a strip of cloth from his clothes and carried the weak Yi Shuihen on his back. He tied the 2 of them together with a strip of cloth. Step by step, Qin Hao ventured deeper into the dark forest. Boss, I can't be saved. Don't take the risk. For me, It's a waste of energy. I told you to shut up. Qin Hao didn't stop. When he examined Yi Shuhen's injuries, he had already figured out the poison in his body. As Dindi, Qin Hao's ability to decompose herbs and poisons was extremely strong. What he needed to do now was to enter the dark forest and search for the herbs to neutralize Yi Shuhen's poison. However, this journey would be fraught with danger. Not to mention that Qin Hao was carrying a dying man on his back. Compared to the explosive flame mountain range, the dark forest was even more dangerous. The only difference was that the dark forest was very small, not even half of the explosive flame mountain range. Chapter 614. As he ran, Qin Hao could feel Yi Shuhen's life aura growing weaker and weaker behind him. He couldn't help but feel anxious, sweat dripping down his face. However, as Qin Hao scanned the area, he discovered that none of the dark herbs that he smelled that could be used as medicine were usable after he personally tested them. Either the essence of the herbs was too low, or the toxins were too weak. There were two ways to save Yi Shuhen. One was to fight poison with poison and find something more poisonous than his body. The other was to use medicine to detoxify the poison. However, neither of these two methods met the requirements. Unknowingly, Qin Hao had ventured deep into the core area of the dark forest, killing many darkness magic beasts along the way. His clean clothes were once again stained with black blood. If I can't find a suitable herb, Shuhen's life will be in danger. Damn it. Qin Hao stopped and took 2 deep breaths. He didn't know how long he had been searching in the endless dark forest. His body felt tired, and Yi Shuhen on his back had fallen asleep at some point. If he couldn't find it, it would be troublesome. At this time, the sound of a raging storm came from ahead, accompanied by the miserable cries of magic beasts. At the same time that the storm was wreaking havoc, it revealed an extremely shocking power. This power was extremely strong, and it immediately attracted Qin Hao's attention. Could be a peak darkness magic beast? Let's go take a look. Qin Hao carefully advanced. If this darkness magic beast was powerful enough, he could try to use it as a catalyst for Yi Shuhen's medicine. Speaking of which, it was quite strange. At the edge of the dark forest, the smog was very heavy, but after entering the core area, the smog became much thinner. Especially at this time, Qin Hao had arrived at a rugged stone forest. The smog had almost completely disappeared, allowing him to see everything. In this chaotic stone forest, the stones were strangely shaped and varied in size. At the end of the stone forest, there was a huge dark cave. The cave entrance was sinister, like the mouth of a beast. Not only was it large, but it was also very frightening. That storm seemed to have come from inside the cave, because there was a suction force spiraling around the cave entrance. In fact, Qin Hao's judgment was correct. In the next second, he saw the huge hole suddenly shake, as if a giant object was about to come out, shaking the soil outside. Then a giant object really blasted out of the hole. With a crash, it shattered in front of Qin Hao. It was a huge beast bone. Although it was shattered all over the ground, Qin Hao judged that the owner of the bone should be more than 10 meters in size, and its cultivation must be astonishing. Judging from the remnant aura of the beast bone, this was a heavenly holy beast. But in the blink of an eye, its flesh and blood's fleshes. He could clearly see how dangerous the interior of the cave was, and he didn't know what even more terrifying things were hidden inside. If there's a beast king in the cave, it is qualified to be used as a catalyst for the cold water. It is worth my risk. Qin Hao made up his mind and carefully approached. With his myriad spirit body, dragon soul, red lotus soul fire, and the many heaven rank techniques from his previous life, even if he encountered a beast king, he would have the power to fight. Of course, Qin Hao prayed that the thing inside the cave was a low-rank beast king. Otherwise, even he would have to give up his life here. Moreover, he could not summon the old demon for help. The smog of the dark forest had temporarily cut off the soul connection between Qin Hao and the old demon. No, boss, quickly leave. You can't enter this place. Just as Qin Hao entered the cave, Yi Shuhen suddenly woke up behind him. Perhaps because he was awakened by the surrounding chilly wind, his tone was extremely anxious and fearful. "What do you know about this place?" Qinhao's footsteps paused slightly. "Not really. That day, you and Tianzai held me hostage and came to this place. We saw a demonic beast with a beast king being forcefully swallowed by the huge suction force of the cave. The beast king's aura disappeared immediately. I don't know what's inside, but it's too terrifying." Yishuan's voice was not fake. He was extremely fearful. Swallowing a beast king in one breath scared Yuan Tianzai away. That was why Yuan Tianzai hid in the hills of the dark forest. It was the closest place to the core area and the best place to hide from Yilong Yuan's perception. Hiss! Qinhao could not help but gasp. He was still hoping for a fluke. Now, it seemed that even a beast king could be killed. The thing in the cave was definitely not something he could resist. However, such a powerful thing could definitely remove the poison in Yishuan's body. If he went in and succeeded by luck, he could save his brother. Or perhaps both of them would die. Roar! Woof! Just as Qinhao was hesitating, the dog spirit barked excitedly. It seemed to be telling Qinhao to enter. If he missed it, he might regret it for the rest of his life. "Okay, I believe you." Qinhao nodded and carried Yishu Han into the cave. The dog spirit might have sensed the existence of treasures inside. After all, a place guarded by a powerful evil being would produce rare treasures of heaven and earth. At this moment, Qinhao suppressed his own aura, including Yishuan's. He was extremely cautious. Relying on the special ability of the Red Lotus Fire Elemental, Qinhao's eyes turned into two balls of ghostly fire. He could see clearly inside the dark cave. Countless corpses were piled up under his feet. There were human corpses, demonic beasts, and even the withered branches of powerful plants. There were too many to count. Now, these tyrannical existences had all lost their lives and perished here. This made Qinhao even more cautious. He carried Yishu Han on his back and carefully avoided the bones on the ground. If he stepped on them and drew the attention of the evil being, he would be beyond redemption. Fortunately, perhaps because the evil being had just eaten a profound saint beast, it seemed to have eaten its fill and let down its guard. Thus, Qinhao safely arrived at the bottom of the cave without alerting the other party. After looking around, Qinhao was shocked. The bottom of the cave was even larger than the entrance. It was like a water-moon paradise, and the inside was as vast as a stone palace. Of course, this place was even more bloody, and there were even more bones on the ground. What was truly exciting was that in the center there was a giant fruit. Whether it was Qinhao or Yishu Han, neither of them had ever seen such a large fruit before. Its appearance was a bit like a pumpkin. When it stood up, its size was even larger than a restaurant. It exuded a strange fragrance and rich spiritual energy. Without even thinking about it, Qinhao intuitively believed that if he could break this thing open and take out its core, he would definitely be able to save Yishu Han. In fact, cutting off a piece of its flesh would be enough. But why was it moving? That's right. Qinhao's eyes weren't playing tricks on him. This giant pumpkin standing in front of him was really slowly turning, and it looked very leisurely. But when it turned and revealed what was behind it, Qinhao's expression changed greatly. Yishu Han was so frightened that his eyes widened, and he almost cried out. There was actually a person embedded in the back of the giant pumpkin. To be more precise, this person's body was deeply embedded in the pumpkin. His hair was so long that it covered his face, making it impossible to see his face. His limbs were wrapped in vines that tied him to the pumpkin like ropes. The scene was extremely strange. His body was very shriveled. Judging from his figure, he should be an old man. Chapter 6:15. The old man immediately made his move. His shriveled body trembled with purple light, and a thick vine shot out from the pumpkin. It extended like a tentacle and pierced towards Qinhao's chest. Qinhao stepped on the water with the wind god's movement steps, sweeping past like a gust of wind, narrowly avoiding the attack. Boom! A large boulder behind him was pierced through by the vines, and the boulder shattered into pieces. Oh, he dodged it? The elder's dirty face was slightly surprised. The low-level Yuan monarchs and beast kings that he had killed in the past had not been able to dodge the attack easily. However, the young man in front of him was only a level 5 heavenly sage and was carrying a person on his back. Yet, he was able to dodge the attack. It's a high-level movement technique. The elder's murky eyes lit up with interest. That was close. Cold sweat trickled down Qin Hao's forehead. If he had been stabbed, even his dragon soul body would not have been able to withstand it. Since you can dodge one, why don't you try 3? The old man attacked again. His body that had sunk into the pumpkin once again emitted a purple light. Instantly, 3 thorny vines shot out like 3 lashing whips. A crisp sound rang out as the vines coiled around Qin Hao. Heaven trampling technique. Qin Hao activated his essence power and channeled it into his feet. With one step, he carried Yi Shuihan and shuttled between the 3 vines. No matter how the elder tried to catch him, he was able to dodge it with his agile movement technique. This battle lasted for more than 10 seconds. It seemed easy, but it was full of killing intent. On the surface, the elder did not seem to have the upper hand. Qin Hao was not optimistic either. He had escaped death several times and used up his essence power quickly. After landing on the ground, he was sweating profusely. This person is stuck in the pumpkin and seems to be unable to leave. His meridians have been broken and are affecting his performance. Otherwise, I would not have been able to hold on for so long. After a few exchanges, Qin Hao saw through the elder's situation. The elder used the pumpkin as his body and the vines as his meridians. The cultivation level of a supremacy almighty was greatly weakened. Haha, interesting. Again, the elder had been trapped here for too long. This was the first time he had met someone as interesting as Qin Hao. He was obviously weak, but he was able to unleash extraordinary combat power. In particular, Qin Hao's thoughts were very sharp and his skills were very strong. The old man could see with a glance that he was a junior with excellent martial arts talent. Whoosh, 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 as he spoke. Vines that filled the sky extended from the pumpkins back into the air. This time, it wasn't just 1, nor was it 3. Instead, it was densely packed like the hair of a mad demon. Under the old man's control, the messy tentacles almost occupied every corner of the stone palace, leaving Qin Hao with nowhere to hide. Once again, they attacked. This time, I want to see how you're going to dodge. The old man was full of confidence. You don't need to dodge. Red, red, red. With a thunderous roar, Qin Hao's aura suddenly soared. His entire body ignited with a bright red flame. The flames seemed to have turned the entire stone palace into a lava cave. The temperature inside the cave soared rapidly. Qin Hao took out his dragon-slaying sword and swung it down with all his might as the vines rushed toward him. Whoosh! 100-meter-long flame shot out and cut off all the vines. These vines were like severed vipers. After landing on the ground, they twisted and turned, then burned to ashes in the flames. At the same time, the stone palace was shaken by the sword qi, causing the ground and mountains to shake. Rubble rolled down, and the old man's blood-curdling screams rang out. There was no doubt that the old man's cultivation was overwhelming. Unfortunately, he couldn't use his own combat abilities and could only rely on the pumpkin and vines as weapons. The vines belonged to the herbaceous type and were perfectly countered by the red lotus fire. However, the dragon-slaying sword was extremely mighty and thick, and it was the best weapon to execute powerful attacks. Qin Hao did not choose the purple meteorite sword because of this. In comparison, the purple meteorite sword was more agile and sharp. It was more suited for quick sword moves like graceful sword and assassination. The dragon-slaying greatsword was a perfect match for Qin Hao's ultimate move, and it could unleash its full power. After this sword strike, the old man suffered quite a bit of damage. Of course, he wasn't injured. However, the pumpkin he relied on showed signs of cracking. This was undoubtedly fatal to the old man. If he lost pumpkin, he would be useless as a cripple. You! are simply unforgivable. I want you dead." The old man was like a tiger whose tail had been stepped on. He let out the most ferocious roar in 100 years. The surging purple aura of the Yuan Venerate wrapped tightly around the pumpkin, not allowing it to get hurt again. At this moment, the old man controlled the pumpkin and made it roll like a tire toward Qin Hao. "Run!" Qin Hao made a prompt decision. He used the water wind step and ran. With the protection of a Yuan Venerate powerhouse's Yuan Qi, the pumpkin was as hard as a steel wheel. If it was hit, Qin Hao would be torn apart on the spot. Carrying Yishu Han on his back, Luo Yunyang ran, without stopping, and headed straight out of the cave. Bang! 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 After escaping from the underground palace, Qin Hao ran around the stone forest in a futile attempt to use the boulders to obstruct the pumpkin's pursuit. Who would have thought that the old man would be incomparably enraged? He didn't care what was in front of him at all. He crushed everything in his path, crushing all the giants. It was as if he wouldn't stop until he killed Qin Hao. "Old man, you can't use your full strength. You can't catch up to me. Give up." As Qin Hao ran, he instigated the other party and provoked the old man. However, what he said was the truth. If Qin Hao used his Yuan Qi wings to escape, the old man definitely wouldn't be able to catch up. In comparison, the old man couldn't use his Yuan Qi wings, and his cultivation base was crippled. However, Qin Hao was determined to get the pumpkin on the old man's back. Thus, he didn't intend to escape. Instead, he wanted to start a war of attrition with the old man and see who would give up first. Is that so? Suddenly, the rolling pumpkin stopped. A dazzling purple glow condensed behind Qin Hao. That glow was unprecedentedly intense. The old man's surging aura shook the surroundings and caused the surrounding earth and rocks to crumble. "It's too troublesome to chase after you. I won't have to chase after you as long as you die." Sky-shocking phoenix glass flow. With an explosive shout, countless powerful sword chi appeared densely around the pumpkin. As soon as the old man shouted, the sword chi rose into the air as if they were real. They were like peerless divine swords, piercing towards Qin Hao. They were like meteors that covered the sky, making it impossible for people to dodge. Oh no! Qin Hao sensed the surging aura behind him and heard the sound of the air being torn apart. He knew that he couldn't dodge this attack, let alone receive it. The sword chi was too ferocious. It was comparable to an attack from a 7th level Yuan Venerate. Every ray of sword chi was enough to kill anyone below the 6th level Yuan Venerate level. The Void Spirit Cauldron's Golden Bell protection wouldn't even be able to block a single ray of sword chi. However, why did this sword chi feel so familiar? Where had he seen it before? Sky-shocking Phoenix Glass Flow. Fully Temple. This was the Phoenix Glass Palace's sect-guarding sword technique, the ultimate move. Could the strange person behind him be a senior from the Fengli Temple? 9th generation disciple of the Fengli Temple, Qin Hao, pays his respects to the patriarch. Qin Hao couldn't figure it out. Since he was going to die anyway, he had no choice but to brace himself. He stopped his water wind steps and bowed deeply behind him. Crack! Qin Hao's greeting of a 9th generation disciple was like a clap of thunder that struck the old man's mind. His eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. Then he panicked. Not good. There was no time to think. The old man knew very well how powerful his ultimate move was. However, the sword move had already been unleashed. It was too late to stop. At this critical juncture, the old man risked his life and blocked in front of Qin Hao. The purple glow on the pumpkin was pushed to the extreme. Boom! 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 With a series of striking sounds, the falling sword chi smashed into the pumpkin like meteors, shattering its protective aura. Gradually, the pumpkin's skin cracked as well. Ah! The old man's heart-wrenching scream was heard. The saint weapon exploded with a boom. When the last sword chi fell, the old man was sent flying thousands of meters away. The huge pumpkin crashed into a small hill. The hill collapsed and dust filled the air. However, these fatal attacks were all blocked by him. Qin Hao was unharmed. Qin Hao fell into a daze as he looked at the scene of devastation and the countless holes on the ground that were blasted open by the sword chi. He had seen Shan Kang's sky-shocking phoenix glass flow. Compared to the old man, it was on a completely different level. It was like comparing a child to a man in his prime. Senior. Qin Hao didn't have time to admire the destructive power of the sky-shocking phoenix glass flow. Carrying Yi Shuihan, he anxiously flew toward the collapsed hill. At this moment, he was completely convinced that the pumpkin weirdo was from the Fengli Temple. However, after taking his ultimate move, was the old man dead? If he was dead, Qin Hao would blame himself. After being crippled for so many years, even the old man's sky-shocking phoenix glass flow has weakened to such a degree. I'm really useless. Qin Hao had just arrived when he saw a pumpkin rolling out of a pile of rocks. The old man shook the dust off his head, his eyes blank. At this moment, his body was covered with sword wounds. Some of the wounds were so deep that his bones could be seen. However, the old man didn't care at all. It seemed that he had long been used to it. Perhaps he was numb. Instead, he stared blankly at Qin Hao. At this moment, he only had eyes for Qin Hao. Senior, you're fine. You're so lucky. Qin Hao breathed a sigh of relief. He could also see that the old man had drawn those terrifying sword energies to his body. Although the pumpkin skin was damaged, it had not split open. It was clear that this pumpkin was the source of the old man's survival. If the pumpkin had been damaged, the old man would have died. You're a child of the Fengli Temple? After a long while, the old man asked foolishly. Qin Hao nodded. I'm a 9th-generation disciple. The 8th-generation head, Chun Kang, is my uncle. Kang? The old man murmured, his eyes blank, as if he was lost in his memories. The pine waves in the blue. The phoenix glaze remains for all eternity. Is Chun Kang the son of that little fellow Chun Rukin? Senior, Chun Rukin is the 7th-generation head of our sect. May I ask who you are? Qin Hao couldn't help but be shocked. The 7th-generation head of the Fengli Temple, Chun Rukin, was called a little fellow by the old man in front of him. Then who was this person? How old was he? I'm Shan Tao, also known as Shun Tianfeng. When Chun Rukin was born, I held him. Shun Tianfeng smiled meaningfully. His smile was very kind, as if he had returned to the past. Shun Tao, Shun Tianfeng, the chief dean of the Starry Moon Academy. Boom! Qin Hao's eyes widened. He was deeply shocked by the other party. Chapter 6:16. The scene was still fresh in his mind. When Qin Hao had first arrived at Fengli Temple, he had defeated the outer gate, the inner gate, beaten the deacon, and slapped the sect leader. He had also competed with the inner disciple Chunan. To test one's spiritual power, one needed a soul testing stone. The soul testing stone in Fengli Temple was left by Shun Tianfeng. Shun Tianfeng was an invincible legend in the Jiang Kingdom. He was the first super genius to rise from a weak country to an empire. Like Qin Hao, he had crushed the Four Nations martial arts competition and passed all the tests to become a disciple of Star Moon College, one of the 4 major colleges in the Luoshui Empire. In just 20 years, he had become the deputy dean. In the end, he had taken another 10 years to sit in the supreme position of the dean. For some unknown reason, it was rumored that he had died 200 years ago. As for how Shan Tianfeng died, it was still a mystery to this day. No one could figure it out. Unexpectedly, Qin Hao had met a legendary figure in the Dark Night Forest. He was extremely shocked. It seems that Tian Shulin's position as the dean was not glorious. With just a thought, Qin Hao thought of some clues. The next second, he had already asked, "It is rumored that you have died in Luoshui. How'd you end up like this? Didn't you pass Tian Shulin's position to him?" "I have died." Shin Tianfeng was stunned. Then he raised his head and laughed wildly. "Ha ha ha. Yes, I'm afraid they can't wait for me to die. Who is Tian Shulin? He is just a small elder of the inner yard. Is he now the dean? It is really unfortunate for Star Moon College." After that, he shook his head repeatedly. "Senior, what is going on?" Jin Hao thought his guess was not far from the truth. Shen Tianfeng had obviously been framed. It started 60 years ago. At that time, the so-called Tian Shulin you mentioned was still a young boy who had become an elder of the inner yard by sucking up to others. Shen Tianfeng took a deep breath and said slowly. He had absolute trust in Jin Hao. Those who were not core disciples of Fengli Temple would never be able to recognize the supreme skill of Fengli Temple, shocking Phoenix Glass style. There were only two kinds of people who saw the Phoenix Glass shocking style move. One was a dead person. The other was the successor of the next sect master. Only the successor of the sect master would have the privilege of watching the current sect master use this move. Jin Hao, this talented junior, was very likely to be the successor of the 9th generation of disciples. 60 years ago, Shen Tianfeng was in high spirits and was at the peak of Sword Dao. He once fought with the Sword King for 3 days and 3 nights without a winner. Then he fought with the Sky Sword Elder and killed the 10,000 Swords Mountain with 1 sword. In fact, at that moment, whether it was Shen Tianfeng's aura or swordsmanship, he was vaguely above his 2 strong opponents. However, he did not use his full strength. The power of his swordsmanship was adjusted to be on par with his opponents, giving the illusion that they were equally famous. To be precise, Shen Tianfeng's swordsmanship had reached the level of a heavenly being. He did not care much about the fight for fame in the secular world. Under his leadership, Starry Moon Academy became the strongest among the 4 academies. If there were no accidents, he would be the first to break through to the emperor level and also the peerless genius who had the chance to strive to become a sword emperor. However, an accident happened to him. I have a good brother called Shirun. Compared to the relationship between us, it is like the person behind you now. Even at the critical moment of life and death, we will not abandon each other. I don't need to say this. You will naturally understand the relationship between us. Shen Tianfeng looked at Jin Hao with admiration. This boy had the same spirit of brotherhood as him in the past. It was a pity that his brother, Shirun, had gone mad while practicing swordsmanship and was on the verge of death. According to the secret records of Starry Moon Academy, only the dark demonic aura in the Dark Night Forest could save his brother. Shen Tianfeng came here with his sword to kill 10,000 beasts and obtain 10,000 cores. Back then, his cultivation was at the king level. He did not care about his life and went deep into the core area of the Dark Night Forest to engage in a life and death battle with a peak beast king. Then, just as he was about to win, he suddenly suffered a sneak attack from behind by a masked man. That sneak attack not only caused Shen Tianfeng to be defeated, but he also suffered the counterattack of the peak beast king. Faced with 2 attacks, Shen Tianfeng was caught off guard and was immediately crippled. When a masked man took off his mask, Shen Tianfeng was extremely shocked. He also felt as if his heart was being stabbed. That was his good brother, Shirun. For the number 1 in Starry Moon Academy that he said, I agreed to fight with the Sword King. For the King of Swordsmanship that he said, I fought with the Sky Sword Elder. And to protect his life, I barged into the Dark Night Forest alone. I was not afraid of the corrosion of the dark fog, and I was not afraid of fighting with 10,000 beasts. I was determined to collect demonic aura and help him achieve great success in his demonic sword. Shen Tianfeng smiled bleakly. Shiren's swordsmanship was to infuse the demonic sword into the sword. What a joke! Well, I collected a large amount of demonic aura and was filled with joy, thinking that I could save him. He ran over and stabbed me in the back. He even injected the fatal demonic aura that I collected into my body, making me suffer a fate worse than death. My physical body decayed, and in the end, he even abandoned the crippled me in this dark forest. The forest was eaten by wild beasts, but he did not expect that the dying me miraculously survived. Relying on this pumpkin, the crippled me was not destined to die. Ha ha ha! Shen Tianfeng laughed loudly again until his face was covered in tears. It was not that he was sad about Shiren's betrayal. It was more like he was laughing at his own stupidity and feeding his conscience to a dog. I see. Jin Hao sighed deeply and secretly clench his fists. Senior Shen Tianfeng was so loyal and righteous, but Shi Ren pretended to be possessed and tricked him into barging into the dark night forest alone. He also despicably launched a sneak attack. Such a vicious traitor should not live in this world. At the same time, Qin Hao's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that Tian Shulin, the Star Moon Academy's president, was fake, and the person controlling Star Moon Academy was Shi Ren? This pumpkin is the only thing in the dark forest that is not corroded by the demonic aura. Not only that, but it can also absorb the dark demonic aura. I believe you can tell that the reason why there is no haze in this core area is because this pumpkin has absorbed it. Shen Tianfeng said. The pumpkin was no doubt a sacred existence in the dark forest. This pumpkin had also saved Shen Tianfeng's life, allowing him to struggle at death's door until now. Senior, do you know why Shi Ren did this to you? Qin Hao asked. This is also what I want to ask Shi Ren. Why did he do this to me? Unfortunately, I can't go out. Shen Tianfeng shook his head helplessly. The pumpkin relied on the dark, demonic aura to nourish it. Once it left the dark forest, it would gradually rot. If the pumpkin spoiled, Shen Tianfeng would definitely die. After all, Shen Tianfeng's physical body was already paralyzed. His internal organs were failing, and his meridians were all destroyed. He wanted revenge. There was not a moment when he did not want to go out. Unfortunately, he could not go out. The hatred suppressed in his heart was like a mountain pressing down on him. It's just that I didn't expect to meet a descendant of the Fengli Temple in the Dark Night Forest. Even if I, Shen Tianfeng, die today, I can rest in peace. And that kid behind you, he doesn't have much life left. If he doesn't get rid of the dark poison in his body, even the Zenith Heaven Immortal won't be able to save him. Shen Tianfeng had already seen through Yi Shuihin's symptoms based on his intuition. Chapter 617. That's why I risked my life to enter the core area. Senior, please share the pumpkin essence with me and save my brother. Qin Hao looked at him earnestly. He had sensed that Yi Shuihan had fallen into a coma again. If he could not wake him up this time, he would fall into eternal darkness. This, Shen Tianfeng was stunned. The pumpkin was the foundation of his survival. Sharing its essence was undoubtedly sharing his life with Yi Shuihan. However, this pumpkin could not passively absorb the dark poison. It could only absorb it actively. Active absorption would take time. Every 2 months, he would only be able to absorb dark devil aura for a day. In other words, the pumpkin could not absorb the poison in Yi Shuihan's body. He could only break it open and feed the seeds to Yi Shuihan. Forget it. It's fate that brought us together, and it's also fate. Let this old man suffer on behalf of the person behind you. Shen Tianfeng's expression was resolute. Immediately, a purple light spread out. 2 vines flew out of the pumpkin and wrapped around Yi Shuihan, who was behind Qin Hao, and hung him in the air. 2 vines wrapped around Yi Shuihan's arms, piercing into his palms at a speed visible to the naked eye. In an instant, a surging life aura shook from the pumpkin and poured into Yi Shuihan's body through the 2 vines. The poison in Yi Shuihan's body also turned into a stinky black smoke and flowed through the 2 vines toward the crippled Shen Tianfeng. This poison was slowly being absorbed by Shen Tianfeng. His face turned darker and more twisted, and he seemed to be in great pain. As for Yi Shuihan's bruised face, it gradually recovered and a rosy color appeared. Qin Hao was very grateful for this. He sensed that Yi Shuihan's life aura was gradually strengthening. However, he could also see that Shen Tianfeng had sacrificed a lot for this. Hey, there's a very strong seal in this kid's body. It seems that this seal is protecting his remaining spiritual consciousness. Shen Tianfeng was very surprised when he used a cultivation technique. The power of the seal was not weak. Yes, my brother seems to have an extremely special constitution. He has a very strong affinity with the water element. Qin Hao nodded. In the past, he knew that Yi Shuihan had a very special physique and that there was a shackle on his body. Only when his life was in danger would the shackle release some of the power that had been imprisoned in Yi Shuihan. when he was helping Tsiougwa fight against Long Fun at Luoshui Lake. The water power of the entire lake was invisibly stirred up by Yishui Han. Qin Hao had a deep impression of this. Unfortunately, having just returned from the wastelands, Qin Hao did not have the time to study Yishui Han's physique and the shackles in his body. The imprisoned power in this brat's body is truly ferocious. I merely touched it for a moment, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Presumably, he is unable to control this power, and this power will harm your brother, which is why he was imprisoned. It was hard to imagine what would happen if this power were to completely erupt. How terrifying it would be. However, it seems that I can unlock this shackle, and I can guarantee that your brother will not have any accidents. Once the shackle is unlocked, his cultivation will definitely soar, and almost no one will be able to stop him. Shen Tianfeng said in shock. He felt that Yi Shuihen's physique was quite compatible with his own cultivation technique. Shen Tianfeng was most proficient in the water arts. His exquisite sword Dao all required the use of water arts to achieve shocking destructive power. If he could pass on his understanding of sword Dao and water techniques to this poison brat in front of him, at this moment, the more Shen Tianfeng thought about it, the more excited he became. He suddenly realized that he had been famous for a long time, but he did not even have a successor. Heaven had eyes. Now, there was an excellent candidate in front of him. Could it be that this was heaven's will? Qin Hao, little boy, I intend to take your brother as my disciple and teach him unparalleled sword techniques. Can you make the decision for him? Shen Tianfeng asked solemnly. Although he was disabled, his pride was everlasting. Shui Han calls me boss, so I'm qualified to make the decision for him. If he is lucky enough to have you as his master, it will be a great fortune for him. Qin Hao was very happy and immediately agreed. Although Yi Shui Han was Yi Long Yuan's precious son, Shen Tianfeng had been famous for a long time and was most qualified to become an emperor-level master in the past. In contrast, if he had not encountered such a disaster, his current cultivation would definitely be above Yi Long Yuan's. Even if Yi Long Yuan stood in front of Shen Tianfeng, he would have to call him senior. Yi Shui Han would definitely not lose out if he became Shen Tianfeng's disciple. Furthermore, Shen Tianfeng was an elder of the Fengli Temple and had a good relationship with Qin Hao. Now, there was nothing better than passing on his experience and insights to Qin Hao's brother. In that case, Shen Tianfeng, will accept this cheap disciple and accept my supreme inheritance of Sword Dao. Swoosh! Swoosh! Another 2 vines flew out and wrapped around Yi Shuihen's feet. At this moment, a powerful force erupted from Shen Tianfeng's body. Visible purple light followed the 4 vines and entered Yi Shuihen's body, constantly impacting the shackle in his body. These purple lights not only carried Shen Tianfeng's cultivation, but also his Sword Dao and life's fighting experience, including the insights he had gained from the Sword King and Sky Sword Elder. These things were so precious that even if they were passed on to an idiot, it could allow the idiot to erupt with terrifying fighting strength in an instant. It was almost imprinted in Yi Shuihen's bones, and he could instinctively exert it. Boom, 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 boom. The surrounding earth waves surged, and the earth shook. The amazing aura forced Qin Hao to keep retreating. At the same time, Qin Hao sensed from afar that those purple lights contained Shen Tianfeng's lifetime understanding and innovation of Sword Dao. These Sword Dao concepts turned into Sword Qi and shot out, as if a peerless swordsman was standing in front of Qin Hao and displaying his lifetime's unique skills. The swift and fierce sword moves and nimble techniques were pleasing to the eyes and made people sigh in admiration. Frankly speaking, Qin Hao just laughed at Shen Tianfeng's Sword Dao concepts and Sword Realm. In Denda's eyes, Qin Hao's Sword Realm in his previous life had long been above Shen Tianfeng's, so he did not think it was a big deal. But if it were an ordinary person, they would probably worship Shen Tianfeng at this moment, sit cross-legged, and close their eyes to comprehend. The scene in front of them was indeed a precious life treasure. But Qin Hao did not. He just nodded and sighed that Shen Tianfeng's artistic conception was indeed extraordinary. It could be said that he was the person with the highest sword realm Qin Hao had seen since his rebirth. And when Shen Tianfeng saw this scene, he was even more surprised. He thought to himself, Qin Hao is quite extraordinary. He is not moved by my sword Dao at all. At this moment, Shen Tianfeng even doubted his own ability. He used to be the chief swordsman of Western Liang. How could Qin Hao not be shocked at all? You should at least scream. On the other side, as Yi Shuhen's toxins were extracted, his vitality was restored. In addition, the turbulent sword Dao comprehension was superimposed in his mind layer by layer, constantly weakening the shackles in his body. All of a sudden, Yi Shuhen's tightly shut eyes opened abruptly. He clenched his fists and let out an earth-shattering cry. Bang! Chapter 618. Qin Hao was shocked to see that Yi Shuehan, who was floating in the air, was emitting a surge of water vapor. In an instant, the surroundings became extremely humid, and there was a continuous drizzle falling from the sky. Behind Yi Shuehan, a vague image of a vast ocean appeared. The ocean pushed forward, vast and vast. Although it was illusory, Qin Hao firmly believed that it must be Source Spirit that Yi Shuehan had awakened. The Source Spirit had just been born and was still immature. With a flash, it entered Yi Shuehan's body again. This was indeed the case. With the guidance of Shen Tianfeng's water technique, the unparalleled sword intent broke through the shackles in Yi Shuehan's body and released his source energy. This violent source energy followed Shen Tianfeng's technique and was like a sheep being led by someone. It flowed through Yi Shuehan's meridians in a balanced manner. There was a limit to it. From then on, Yi Shuehan could control the energy in his body according to Shen Tianfeng's water technique. At the same time, his cultivation level underwent an earth-shattering change. The Origin Master Realm, the Origin Ancestor Realm, the Saint Realm. Level 1 Mortal Saint. Level 2. Level 3. The source energy erupted with an unstoppable force. Level 4. Level 5. Level 6. His aura continued to rise. It was as if the water god had descended to the world, emitting boundless power, making the dark forest seem to glow with vitality under the pure water. A clear ripple could be seen with the naked eye. With Yi Shuehan as the origin, it quickly spread in all directions. Everywhere it passed, the fog was purified. The pitch-black trees and grass on the ground turned into an oasis in the blink of an eye. It was as if a god had created the world. It was a pity that Yi Shuehan's cultivation level was stuck when he tried to break through to level 8 Mortal Saint. The greenery in the Dark Night Forest was only 5 to 6,000 meters wide. The source energy in Yi Shuehan's body shrank into his dantian and lay dormant. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, even I wouldn't have dared to believe it. Looking at this scene, Qin Hao couldn't calm down for a long time. The world in front of him had changed. Of course, Yi Shuehan himself had also changed. He was now at the 8th level of Mortal Saint, and he was the strongest in Luo Shui just a few months ago. In comparison, Tian Boguang, who possessed a source spirit, would be overshadowed by Yi Shuehan. Is this really my power? Yi Shuehan had already woken up. He had also calmed down and was clenching his fists in disbelief. After a short moment of absent-mindedness, he seemed to have thought of something. He lifted his brocade robe and knelt on the ground. He made a grand salute to the place where Shen Tianfeng had been sent flying. Disciple Yi Shuehan kowtows to master for saving my life. The second is to pay respects to Shizuan's virtue of rebirth. That was in the past. Today, let's see who will be beaten to a pulp. Bai Lang's scar was exposed, and he instantly lost his elegant demeanor. His face was ferocious as he spoke ruthlessly. Today's competition was to wash away his shame. Ignore these mad dogs. Let's go. Sayogwa pulled Nalan Li and then walked away with Lin Feng and the others. Brat, you dare to call us mad dogs? Whether it was Bai Lang or Hao Yuduo, their faces were filled with anger. They didn't hide the fact that they were being looked down on by a rookie. I'll be waiting for you in the third stage of the Heavenless competition. If I don't beat you to a pulp, I'm not Bai Lang. Bai Lang pointed at Sayogwa's back. Then he looked greedily at Naransu and licked his lips. Hao Yuduo snorted coldly and left with his people. He secretly swore that he would make his big brother beat Bai Lang to a pulp again. At this time, the arena was gradually filled with people. It was obvious that these people were in groups. It was popular in the inner courtyard to form cliques. For example, Bai Lang's White Wolf Gang and Hao Yodua's Heaven Shaking Gang. It was difficult for a person to gain a foothold in the inner courtyard and be easily bullied. Only the top 5 students on the Heaven list were very arrogant and liked to be alone. Students, please be quiet. Today is the day to witness the results of your hard work. The top 5 students on the Heaven list this year have the right to enter the Medicine Valley to search for treasures. I hope that all of you will do your best. If you are lucky enough to find treasures in the Medicine Valley, you will definitely soar to the sky in the future. As usual, the first round of the Heaven list competition will begin. A white-robed old man with white hair and a white beard floated into the arena. He was Elder Wu of the inner courtyard who was in charge of the Heaven list. He stood on a high platform. When he raised his hand, a huge black light swept out. The black light was so dazzling that people couldn't open their eyes. When the black light dissipated, a pile of strange large stones appeared on the high platform. These strange large stones were stacked on top of each other and accumulated layer by layer. There were a total of 9 layers, and they looked like a small mountain. The topmost stone was the smallest, only the size of a wash basin, but it looked very simple. The second one was the size of a millstone. So on and so forth. The lower one went, the larger the size of the stone. The 9th giant stone at the bottom had a radius of 10 meters. It was not only huge, but it also looked very thick. This is the 9 layers Saint Suppressing Stone. It can measure your physical Saint energy. If you are weak, try the wash basin stone at the top. If you are strong, you can move the second millstone. Of course, when you move the millstone, you will also lift the wash basin stone at the top. In short, whoever moves the highest number of layers will be the winner. Let's see who has the stronger Saint body. Let's begin. After Elder Wu finished speaking, he floated down from the high platform and stared at Sayogwa and the other newcomers with great interest. The senior students all knew the rules of the Heaven list competition. They had all experienced it personally. He deliberately introduced it in such detail for the newcomers like Sayogwa and Lin Feng to hear. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.